Hello there, and welcome to episode 8 of Trek Prime. And this is an episode that I just wanted to get this out of the way, first of all. I've recently become acquainted with Steward Captain Foley from over on Trek Yards, which inspired us to do this. And what happened was we were supposed to come together to do a mutual podcast, a crossover between Trek Yards and Trek Prime, but we didn't get a chance to do that because Stewart had some things that came up. So, we're going to have Stewart and Samuel on one in the very near future. But the subject tonight is sort of the root that came up when we started doing this, isn't it? It's actually a running gag kind of route. And this subject, and it's something you brought up with me when we first started doing this. Gene Roddenberry, he conceived of the idea of Star Trek and actually wrote for it. And he was very good at, especially in TOS, at writing characters and human interest stories. That was his talent. But apparently, even though he was a troubleshooter for Pan Am and had been in the war, he didn't always have a good idea of how to apply, technobabble in future tense, invent new technobabble. So he often tried to find ways to integrate contemporary technology somehow into the dialogue of Star Trek. And the example that came up, which is often a very awkward and humorous thing in TOS especially, is the matter of circuits in Star Trek. And this came up for a very specific reason, because you mentioned something about circuits on starships using warp drive and things like duotronic technology in the 23rd century. And one of you could kind of recap that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the translator that they...
Yeah, the basis for all their technology.
Yeah, that was the common thing. Now, I don't know if that was supposed to be, what they would think of as, like modern day circuit. The translator might be what they would consider a circuit in the 23rd century. Maybe that's the word they traded it for.
Right. You think of Star Trek, like you said, with all the technology they have, phasers. It would be kind of hard, as we understand them, to have circuits. And I want to get into more specifics of that a little later. But I looked it up in preparation for this video on Memory Alpha, which is, if you're not, any of you people out there have not been there, you should really go there if you're into Star Trek, because they are a Wikia site now, and they have an amazing Star Trek library. It's a lot of information. They pretty much made the Star Trek written encyclopedias obsolete. It just goes all across the spectrum. And they define the circuit as a circuit or computer circuit was the complete and close electrical network of a computer system on starships. And they mentioned some examples that I don't remember. I remember these episodes in Enterprise on the NX-01, that a power surge triggered circuits and caused sensor glitches in an episode called The Catwalk. Do you remember that episode too well, Jeff?
Yeah, that's where they were like sleeping in the sort of like they had them all in the pylon, like, or in the underneath the warp field grill. I think it was right. It ran underneath. Kind of like
where the, below the nacelle kind of thing?
Yeah, it was like you'd climb up, I guess you'd crawl up through the pylon, and there was a hatch, and they would be like right underneath the warp coil, along the length of the warp nacelle.
Yeah, I guess, human proximity to the warp nacelle, I should actually write these things down as another subject we should get into, because that's a weird area, but... Anyway, I remember that now. Did you recall them mentioning circuit specifically in that episode, like the word circuit?
I really can't recall if they did.
Yeah.
But I think, if they did, it wouldn't have really been so awkward, because, the thing of it is that, that was supposed to be 100 years before.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, because they might actually be using circuits on a ship that resembles a submarine.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Because, the NX-01 was supposed to be submarine-like, and maybe they had 21st century circuits that actually were circuits. I mean, I don't know if they had a translator.
You'd have seen wires, you'd have seen circuits, you would have seen...
I mean, all that stuff that we get into with TOS. And I don't know if anybody thinks about it, but in the Star Trek pilot, in the very first Star Trek pilot, The Cage, the very first line is Spock asking somebody on the bridge to check the circuit.
Yeah.
In 1960, was that 64 or 65 they made that?
I think, yeah.
So the first word in it is about circuits. So apparently, I guess in the early 23rd century, they still have the term circuit in there, or is
about that line. I mean when Leonard Nimoy goes and check the circuits.
Yeah,
and
he's screaming it. Yeah.
Immediately after he gives that order, they respond all operating. Now, how in the heck can you check every circuit, instantaneously like that, across a ship the size of an aircraft carrier? I mean, it's like, if people, we look at circuits today, we have to pull the backs off of things, and
even in TOS, they had kind of to pull backs off if you saw the.
Yeah, I mean, if you knew something wasn't working right, it would smell, things would burn,
There'd be fires and fumes and things like that, like industrial glues or whatever they use for the starships. But
So in what way was what was he referring to in that situation? Check the circuits of what? I mean, that was
maybe it was another type of circuit we'll get into a little later in this video.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But anyway, because the circuit thing is just a funny rabbit hole, really, because there's some interesting points to this. But also, we talked about The Cage last week as a kind of an after thing for the podcast. And The Cage was its own rabbit hole of Star Trek not really being developed. Yeah. For example, Pike and the crew on that story were obsessed with referring to it as a time warp.
Yeah.
Oh, our time warp factor 7. That guy, the blonde, Jose Taylor was his name. That's right.
Jose, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he was that excitable guy who wanted to use that phaser rifle that giant thing to channel the ship's power and blast this whole rock to bits, which we talked about earlier in the day, actually. But anyway, so the ship's power can make things explode. But again, The Cage, maybe its own little rabbit hole. But he was telling the crew of the Columbia, well, he thought they were, if you know The Cage, he said, the time barrier has been broken. Our new ships can blank.
Yeah.
So we know warp drive existed with NX-01, and you didn't hear Captain Archer say, Travis, time warp 5.
Yeah.
Or you didn't say that from Cochrane's. They were going to time warp in whatever. But they were really into this time warp thing in The Cage. That was a big deal. So
yeah.
They were maybe there was just like there was a new type of warp they were using that they just called it time warp. I don't know. Because time warp became something different later. So, but anyway, I digress. But I don't know. Again, apparently that was all about circuits. So maybe they had a time warp circuit too. I don't know. So maybe I'll bring a time warp circuit. But it's okay. We're doing circuits today, so it's okay to overuse this because that apparently that explained everything. Circuits. I guess maybe that was Gene's catch-all. Well, I don't know what to call it. Call it a circuit. Whatever. So anyway, back to the references. In the episode The Naked Time, Sulu began to regain consciousness when Spock nerve pinched him when he's on the bridge with a sword, and Nurse Chapel was doing tests on Sulu, and she was examining him on circuits called K1 and K3.
Yeah.
What exactly would that mean? Circuits K1 and 3. Is there a special thing that's in the medical sick bay where they have the biobeds that go boom, boom? Yeah. Is there a special set of circuits behind there they can alternate? I don't get. Another thing, I don't get how that would work.
I don't know. I mean, maybe they were just referring to things they had attached to them or something. Maybe a circuit was attached to them.
I mean, it really is. It's a strange thing how these circuits are the catch-all name in TOS for everything.
Yeah. I mean, if you wanted to do this, it was a circuit. If you want to do that, it's a circuit. So circuits were all over that ship, I guess. I mean,
So okay, and I was watching an episode called Patterns of Force of TOS, where they beamed down to this planet that had modeled itself after Nazi Germany because of a historian who had interfered with their society from Earth. And Spock's communicator he had to repair one with parts from another, kind of, I guess, hack it, I guess you'd say today. And they show the open communicator, they linger on it, and it's literally got a 60s-style integrated circuit inside. Yeah. Like a literal circuit. And as you said, they mentioned the translator in a piece of the action. So is the translator just a very advanced circuit with capacitors and all that? I mean, it looks like a real circuit, like something you'd have on a radio or like a transistor. Unless the translator was an advanced transistor somehow. I'm lost here. I mean, the whole circuit thing itself.
Like another ancient terminology for something that they would be using, you know, a transistor and all that. I don't think they would use that word.
Well, they use translator.
Yeah.
But I mean, it looked like a literal circuit in that communicator. There were little capacitors and everything. You could see them.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe with budget, but they were into that circuit. So I guess the communicators had circuits.
Yeah.
I mean, I would hate to think if that blew up, there'd be like a little smoke fire coming out, boom, and my circuits are blowing up, you know, I mean.
Well, circuits I think there was an episode where they actually showed, you know, one of those things laying out on the table and was all apart.
Yeah, Uhura had to go underneath the console to repair, and there were capacitors and circuits under that too. So, I don't know. I mean, maybe, again, with Star Trek at that time in TOS, because, again, even the Klingons, Kor, in his first appearance, he mentioned there was something wrong with the circuit in engineering. So Klingons were into circuits. So I guess in the next generation, in the TOS, I guess we have the translators as the key to every technology. It's the key to our circuits. That makes everything work on the ship. The translator powers our circuits that make the warp drive work, make the computer work. Then they threw Duotronic technology into that. Maybe Dr. Daystrom built out with circuits. I guess it was all circuits. Everything was circuits. Gene wrote a lot of those episodes, so I guess that, I don't know what you call it. That's just a circuit. That's another circuit over here. There's another circuit over there. You know, the engineering is run by a circuit. Whatever. I don't care, you know.
Yeah.
It's just a vicious circle, I guess. I mean, people are thinking they're going to concentrate on the stories. They're not going to care how things are done.
Yeah.
We have a phaser that's energy. But I mean, Gene could have said, "Oh, it's a phaser circuit." I don't know. It just everything could be a circuit. You know, there's circuits on the ship. We've seen them, so I don't know. I mean, maybe they were more into circuits like Enterprise was. They just hadn't worked out that situation yet.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the next generation, which gets really confusing because in the very first, and this is how you mentioned it to me, actually, this whole subject, Encounter at Farpoint. We're in the 24th century. We've got this Enterprise D. And they're introducing isolinear technology, which is a totally different medium. And in the very first pilot, I can't believe you never heard of. When we're first encountering the Q barrier, what's his line? There's something new on the detector circuit.
It's like, hello, we might be 100 years later.
We got sensors and the Federation, and we've established universe and detector circuit. I mean, by 87, it was like, oh, come on, you know. Your writing is great. You're doing this story with Q. I mean, you wonder why Q didn't appear and say, what's up about circuits on your ship?
You know, yeah.
There's circuits on the ship.
After all the years that they spent writing for the movies and stuff like that, and they jumped into Star Trek, it was inexcusable.
Exactly. My Next Generation was this comic.
Era talk. I mean, it was like, come on. I mean, it's like, you know, Gene, ask somebody. What are we going to call this? You know.
No, I mean, was Mike Okuda on board at Farpoint, or did he come along a little later?
I don't know if he started right off the bat. That's a good
question. I don't know that either, but actually, you know, I could look that up because I'm kind of curious to know. I used to know all this stuff, but you know, my memory can't be all Star Trek. Yes, he was on The Voyage Home, and he was on Encounter at Farpoint, so that is not excusable.
Wow, so he was working.
Yeah, and you know, Okuda, he's got his thing. He should have said, no, Gene, you don't have circuits on this ship, the detector circuits. I know he didn't write that.
Maybe they rushed the script behind.
I know he didn't write that. I know Okuda didn't write that.
Yeah.
Because Okuda would call it the censor. Because you mentioned another issue, I'll just kind of lump this one in because this is another Roddenberry-ism, I guess. In the motion picture, and they did this in the TOS in a couple episodes I was watching too. S.H.I.E.L.D. apparently had this distant cousin on the ship known as Screens. and they just put screens up. And, I'm thinking, just for comic effect, they say, okay, let's go into the back and get these giant mesh screens and put them on the front of the ship to filter out the mosquitoes in space or whatever.
And here's the thing, Andre, about the screens. They could have easily explained it, explained it away, and it would have made sense by saying you have shields that protect the ship from, physical and energy damage, okay? But the screens are actually used to, like, block out sensor scans or to...
Like a filter.
Yeah, or just to confuse your enemy.
Or even combine them, like, say, we're putting up sensor screens.
Yeah.
Rather than just, we're going to put screens up.
Yeah.
It's something you do in the fall to protect it from the snow or something, or in the summer.
Explained it, but all those years that they used that, they never bothered to go back and say, well, this is what that means.
With the JJ Universe obsession with windows on the bridge, maybe the screens would make a whole lot more sense. Like, take the windows with the screens on.
Yeah, that you could put screens. You just pull the blinds over the window.
There you go. Never mind the screens, put the blinds over the window.
Yeah, there you go. That's where your screens would be right there.
Right. So, I think Gene wrote some of the motion picture, right?
Yeah.
So, obviously, the great bird of the galaxy didn't really know his future tech. So, I'm surprised he didn't sit down and look at the lingo and say, I gotta kind of get this right. But I guess he was so busy writing characters, he just said, just throw in a screen there, a circuit there, nobody's going to notice.
Yeah.
But it's like...
He had the idea of the big story.
Right. You got to know how Star Trek fans are, though. Star Trek fans are very loyal. I know we are.
They'll excuse a lot.
And they're loyal, and they'll look at it, and they'll say, this isn't right.
Yeah.
They're very sensitive. I know I am. Now, I never noticed it. Maybe, in my mind, I would just hear detector circuit and say, that's some Anson. He didn't know what he was talking about. He just got out of the academy. He just has some random name for it. When I think of it in the context of the show, I'm thinking, come on, guys. Detector circuit in 87. It's gone. And then it goes on. I'd forgotten about it. And I think you alluded to this, though. In The Naked Time, which... Okay. Anyway, that's another rabbit hole, but we could actually maybe do like a Star Trek story on that one day, on how The Naked Time is just strange. Just strange in terms of the Next Generation and what it did. But anyway, early on, the first actual proper episode, but Wesley engineered a circuit on this tractor beam he made. And I believe he mentioned circuits too.
Yeah.
So I guess there's still circuits in this first season of TNG. I mean, I guess that it's still kind of a thing that comes up.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, you'll just hear it, thrown in there somewhere. And, sometimes it'll show up, in later seasons of like Next Generation, or I don't know if they ever did it on Deep Space Nine. I can't recall if they ever used it there, but.
Well, Deep Space Nine, they mentioned that in that episode where Odo first met Roxana Troy and they were trapped in the lift, there was a situation on the station where Odo was wondering how many volts were running through the turbo lift, which had stopped. And he was glancing at exposed circuits on the floor. But, we can look at it that way with that. That's Cardassian technology. So, for all we know, Cardassians were really super mega into circuits.
Yeah.
Maybe if we saw a Cardassian, we'd be like, maybe that's it, because they had the Cardassian War. We don't have sensors. We have detector circuits on Cardassian ships.
Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe, we could explain it all. That's some alien lingo. Like, the Cardassians use detector circuits instead of sensors, whatever that means.
Yeah.
I never heard Ducat say detector circuit, so... All I heard him was talk about himself, but that's Ducat, But, he never said, I detected a Jem'Hadar ship on the detector circuit. I never heard anything like that, or anybody else in Deep Space Nine. They just had circuits around, but that detector circuit, to mention, we know what a sensor is, weren't they using sensors by at least season 2 of TOS as a term?
Yeah, it might have been season 2, when they started.
I don't think they used detector circuit in TOS at all, did they?
Yeah, I mean,
that came out of the blue, really, that detector circuit thing.
when you hear them say detector circuit, the first thing that comes to mind is somebody walking around with a metal detector. Okay, and a big long wire that goes, and that's what it, so that I think that's one of the reasons why they just said no.
I mean, can you imagine if they don't know plans and oh, forget all these fancy tricorders, let's get all these fancy detector circuit metal detectors.
That would have been like the Gold Key comic thing or something.
Oh, yeah, Gold Key. There we go. Well, I'm going to put Gold Key aside because that's like maybe a 3-part video. How deep? Because there's a story there. That's like that's like the origin of the non-prime Star Trek. If you want to look at it.
I think about every Star Trek fan has probably run into the artwork of something from Gold Key Comics. I mean,
the toy companies like the Upside Down Enterprise. Remember that blue Upside Down Enterprise in the toy box?
Yeah. Or they've seen, the warp of the cells aren't drawn right. They got flames coming out the back, or
or Spock in the microfiche.
Yeah. So I mean, I think
and the chemical kit.
Yeah. Most that were they would. I think in the late 70s and in the 80s, you would see a lot of that artwork pop up in different things.
It was sort of an early meme, I guess. Before we had memes.
Because you remember when they used to have those book and record stories.
Yes, I don't remember them mentioning circuits. I mean, they just usually were character-based.
Yeah.
Although, one time Kirk made some bizarre remark referring to them as the United Federation of Peoples. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah, I remember that one.
United Federation of Peoples. It's like a word. It's like...
Of peoples. It's like, we just eliminate the planets. We're just now the peoples.
And you grammatically all messed up. It's like, United Federation of Peoples? Isn't that like the Klingon Empire calling itself we're the Warrior Kapikoplats or something? It's a random word. I mean, it's a made-up word. Oh, it was the one about they encountered these 2 alien robot ships that were warring.
Yeah. In
one of these books and tapes, and Kirk is saying, "Well, if you keep this up, the United Federation of Peoples." What? What? He's a what?
Yeah.
But again, it's like Gold Key kind of stuff. Oh, yes, and they get everybody wrong. Remember Sulu was African-American and he had a little afro?
Yeah.
He was basically John Shaft, basically. He was just John, and he had a blue outfit.
Yep.
And Uhura was Caucasian and blonde.
Yeah. It's
like
they even watch a single episode of this?
I mean, they got Kirk right. But Sulu was not right. The horror was way not right. It was just... Yeah. And the stories actually seem like could be Star Trek stories. I don't know. Maybe that was a parallel universe where they had a United Federation of Peoples. Uhura was blonde and Sulu was... It was a mess. But, like I said, all that era, I excuse. But they never mentioned circuits in any of that stuff, did they? I never saw circuits in Gold Key. They were more into chemical kits and film.
Yeah.
I guess maybe the Enterprise wasn't circuit; it had film.
Yeah, and TV.
Like, Spock, it's time for Ding Dong School.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was a crazy setup. But with circuits, Voyager, I guess, grew out of that, didn't they? They circuits were over by then.
Yeah.
They went into. I guess we could do another thing on this, but it isn't a long subject. We talked about it today. We had a little lunch today. We got into these bioneural.
Yeah.
What do they call those? Bioneural gel packs. And what they were is they looked like silicone implants, or like the stuff you put a catheter bag in.
Yeah, I mean, what it was, I think it was a Ziploc freezer bag, and they probably put like green Jello or something.
Yeah, either that or it was like some kind of viscous epoxy. I don't know, something. Yeah. And it was supposed to. It had some biotechnology, and they ended up getting infected or not working. It didn't seem like it was successful.
Yeah.
But again, the gel packs were a concrete thing. They weren't the gel circuit. They were just gel packs. They weren't like a circuit board with gel all over it, Although circuit packs didn't have gel, but, like solder. But, but no. But I guess they grew out of it. But as far as the real Star Trek use of circuit goes, would you say that the most incongruous use of it would be that counter at Farpoint one.
You know what? I know. I mean, you said when you watched it. Okay, I remember when you told me this. When you watched
yeah,
it.
I just went past me.
Yeah, you didn't even pick up on it.
I remembered it when you said it, but I said maybe it was just because I'm one of these people. If something is too messed up, I hit block it out after a time.
Yeah.
But when I first saw it when I was 7 years old, I wasn't thinking of
Maybe at the time you were just really excited that something new was on. But
well, at the time, yeah, I was young too. But I mean, when I'm watching it at 21, I'm surprised I didn't think, what did he just say?
Yeah.
But I guess maybe I don't think of Encounter at Farpoint and think there's something on the detector circuit. I don't think about that. Yeah. But now I think about, and also he was a young guy. He wasn't. If maybe Picard had said that, I would have thought, "What's wrong with you?" But when that guy said it, I thought maybe he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know things properly yet. Yeah, he's distracted.
But when I remember hearing it, and I was like, it kind of struck me funny. But like I said, I didn't make any fuss about it. But I did hear it. I picked up on it, and I was like,
well, it was loud. I mean, he said it. It wasn't like under his breath. It was, and there was a reaction shot to it too.
Yeah.
Because I was watching Encounter at Farpoint, and he's like, and it's like, isn't it like the 7th or 8th line in? Because
it's right at the very beginning of the
right. Because Picard is talking about his new command, and he comes on the bridge, and they're talking about snooping around, and Data's trying to find Snoop, and then and then he's saying, yes, it means to sling, slither, and all that, and pussyfoot and gumshoe. And isn't that when he comes in with that detector circuit stuff?
Yeah.
Because wasn't that before Lieutenant Torres got frozen?
That was like when they were in the courtroom thing.
Right, because he was trying to shoot Q with the little what do you call them? The crickets.
Cricket phaser.
Yeah, Torres got frozen first, then Yar got frozen in the court. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, but it wasn't Torres that said detector circuit, was it? It was some other guy.
I can't remember what his name.
It was some orange-shirted character, wasn't it?
Basically a red shirt.
Yeah, something new in the detector circuit.
Yeah, that was just one.
And we never heard it again in the show, did we? We never heard it again in Farpoint.
Yeah.
Did they mention sensors in Farpoint? I'm trying to remember they mentioned sensors in that.
Sensors.
It's such a big part of Star Trek Link.
Because there was, I think, if I remember right, there were 2 writers on that episode, and Roddenberry was one of them. I can't remember who the other one was.
Oh, was Pillar on there by then, or
excuse me?
Was Michael Pillar on there by then, or was it Rick Berman, or?
Oh, geez, I don't know. I have to look at the credits, but Roddenberry's his part of the story was everything about Q, okay, encountering him and all that, and the other part of that story was about the Farpoint station and the big jellyfish and all that. So you could tell whose parts were whose by listening to the lingo
and the circuit. Was Roddenberry.
So you knew where they were, it's like, so you could kind of, oh yeah, that's his line, and this is the other guy's line, and it's like,
I'm just trying to see, because there's so much of memory off about Encounter at Farpoint. I mean, it's at the beginning, but like I said, I don't always watch them that intently, but all right. It looks like it was written by 2 people from the classic series. It looks like Gene Roddenberry wrote the stuff about Q, and Miss D.C. Fontana wrote the rest.
Oh, okay, that was who it was.
So apparently she knew who the censors were.
Yeah.
But apparently he was into circuits, so because it wasn't mentioned censors when those jellyfish came up. So maybe the detector circuit is metal detector. Like maybe they have like this big metal detector on the front of the deflector, and it comes out and is a detector circuit.
Yeah.
I wonder if any other fans in those days said, what are they talking about with this detector circuit stuff? Because they never mentioned it again, obviously. So DC Fontana, because I remember in the early years of TNG, they had the old TOS writers in there.
Yeah.
I know DC Fontana worked on a couple of the early ones because they really didn't have a new group yet. So yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, what you were saying is that Gene wrote the Q story, basically?
Yeah. I mean, of course, the lines he wrote in there, you could tell there was a difference. But yeah, he was doing that part of it.
But Fontana did the Farpoint and the jellyfish and the rest, and
so they brought 2 stories together.
So the detector circuit was the introduction of Q.
Yeah.
So basically, his first line written for that would have been something new in the detector circuit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like I said, I know that I think we've talked about this before. It goes in with another element. There's been this tendency in recent years. I mean, I wanted to get into a separate thing with it, but it might be a good way to kind of, define this. There's been a lot of talk that Gene Roddenberry's participation in what made Star Trek big was not as enormous as people thought. That could be just past tense stuff, but I think it was a communal effort. I think Gene came up with the idea of the multiracial crew. I think that he conceptualized it well, but the technobabble part, I don't think that was him.
Well, no, I mean he probably like the show. I mean, had a lot of writers. When he was
right, he wasn't just him doing it all alone.
Yeah, nobody could sit there and write every single season out. I mean, it's just one person, but
Harlan Ellison might have wanted to. I mean, I don't want to speak ill of the dead. I mean, R.I.P. Harlan, but he had his fragile issues. But other than that, Gene wouldn't have wanted to.
Yeah, but when you get other writers, you obviously freshen the well of ideas that you can come up with for different episodes,
like circuits.
Yeah, circuits. So you got like I said, it was just. To say that he didn't contribute a whole lot, they're not ignoring a lot of things.
He contributed circuits.
Yeah, I mean, you can't just take the creator of an entire franchise and say, oh, he contributed nothing to it. I mean,
no, he came up with the idea of the interracial crew. I mean, that was his baby. He wanted the crew to be multiracial. But multicultural aspect of the ship. The spaceship Earth idea, that was his, which was a grand idea. So I guess, if you want to look at it that way, so who cares if he put in a detector circuit there? I mean, he created this idea way bigger than that. It's just people who really admire Star Trek as the future. The idea that this is not in a galaxy far, far away like Star Wars, and it's not some kind of cautionary thing set in space like some science fiction is. This is supposed to be our future. So when they hear things like sensors, they latch onto that, and they use that as a term of reference. So when somebody suddenly comes up with, we're using detector circuits, they're like, oh, wow. So I think it trips people up, But like I said, with me, I guess I'm focusing on the story sometimes. So when they make a techno reference that doesn't make sense, maybe I don't notice it initially.
Yeah, because they've been using one term for years, and everybody got used to hearing it. And then when they replace it with something else, it's like, huh? What are you talking about?
Have you ever heard of that syndrome? I think it has a name where people hear one thing, but it doesn't make sense to replace it with another. One of them is Forrest Gump, where they instantly grammar correct Forrest Gump's thing about the chocolates.
Yeah.
Apparently, everybody says the line something like, my mom always told me life is like a box of chocolates, and that's not what he said at all. He said life was like a box of chocolates. Not grammatically correct, but it's what he said. Maybe when that guy said detector circuit, my mind auto-corrected that to sensor.
Yeah.
Because I thought detector circuit's wrong, I get to auto-correct that.
Yeah.
So when you repeated it, and I looked back and said, it's definitely detector circuit, and my mind just didn't want to comprehend it.
Yeah.
I don't know, when you first saw it, did it kind of come to you clear as day, or did you auto-correct it at first, too?
Yeah, I picked it up because I said, I remember they referenced that. I mean, when in TOS in the first season, I was like, that's an old term they brought back on there, and I was like, because I don't know, I picked up on the little details of talk like that on these shows, and I was just like, I was surprised that they introduced that into this, which was supposed to be so futuristically more in the future than...
On the Next Generation, I noticed one thing they did. Maybe somebody said, Gene, knock it off with this. He didn't add the screens.
Somebody obviously picked up on it and said, look, we can't use that. I mean, it's, we can't use this word.
I need to rewatch the motion picture, because did he mention screens a lot in that, or was that just a passing reference?
Not during the series as a whole.
No, I mean in the motion picture, in the first movie.
Yeah, I think it was just when they were going to get hit by V'ger's energy thing, whatever the hell it was.
The energy beams that were coming out of the probe, yeah.
Then Decker wanted to have them raise screens and shields, for defense, and Kirk said, no, we don't want to appear hostile.
Well, Scotty said there was instability in the warp drive when they created that wormhole. That's another weird thing. I never saw warp drive instability create wormholes before, but I guess they can. But
that's you're getting into like warp theory and stuff, which is really more theoretical science than anything, which is over my pay grade. I'm like,
is that what you think they were kind of thinking in the motion picture? They just created some random thing.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, when you're dealing with creating gravity, you're playing around with gravity, which this is how I understand it. They're projecting a gravity field in front of a ship that's basically pull it fast. The ship is not propelling itself. They're creating a gravity well that's similar to what a black hole is, and it's pulling the ship faster than light. So if you're going to go that route, I suppose it's possible you could create a wormhole if there's something wrong with the warp drive. I guess, but the thing of it is, though, the wormhole really wasn't pulling the Enterprise anywhere. It was basically just there. I mean, maybe. And
there was an asteroid in its field, I guess. That's what.
Maybe that was the reason why there was such this time distortion through the whole ship, where everybody was talking really slow.
Yeah, it was like it turned everybody into auto-tune for some reason. It was just a weird thing.
So, obviously there was, the protection against that was not working. So, I mean, it was obviously a hell of a mess because, it started.
Maybe the screens caused that. I don't know. Maybe the screens didn't work, and that caused that wormhole to happen where they were photon torpedoes.
Yeah.
And all that business. So I mean,
like everybody was flying at warp speed. They had the streaks of color going by.
Well, as they said about motion picture, they were concerned with becoming more about the effects and the flash than story.
Yeah,
because they were trying to show all these things they could do off, but the story got kind of lost in translation to some people. I mean, it never bothered me because it's a different kind of thing. It's a cerebral thing, and that that's one of the things I always liked about Star Trek, but I know people are like, when are they going to blow up Klingons, or is there going to be a villain? They're looking at that, and that's fine. Not the Khan balanced it well, but it was, there's worse. There's definitely worse, but, there's better, but there's worse, But as far as the screens are concerned, I never heard them mentioned again. Although, I think in those book and tape, I think screens were in that, too.
Yeah.
But again, Uhura was blonde, so, and that was a Federation of Peoples.
Yeah.
So, maybe the Federation of Peoples have screens. I don't. Maybe that's what happened. Kirk was like, "Okay, we got this Federation of Peoples, and they have screens, so we'll borrow screens from these." I don't know.
If you think about it, there was a lot of different interpretations of what kind of organization Kirk and the others belonged to. For a long time,
there was USPA.
Yeah, I mean,
Base Command, I think, was one of them.
They were throwing the terms out there right and left during the show. I mean, it's like, God, make up your mind. What is this thing anyway?
No, they had Vulcan Space Central in one, yes. But didn't they have a Space Command or a Space Central for Earth, too?
Something, like that.
Yeah, they had some random name. And when did Starfleet and the Federation really show up? Was it season 1?
That's a good question. I'm trying to figure out when they actually used the term Starfleet and United Federation of Planets. Well,
it was in season 2. I know that because when I watched season 2, they're mentioning Federation and Starfleet to be the band.
Yeah. If I was going to create something like Roddenberry did, I would at least got those things nailed down before I would have started writing. The thing. So I don't. Because they were doing this on the air. Basically, then one episode they call it this, the next episode they're calling it that. It's like
they're writing the lingo.
They should have had all that stuff straightened out beforehand.
And, maybe when they started wanting to cancel the show, maybe Roddenberry figured, if I insert some weird name here and weird name there, the show's not going to last, so who cares? He wasn't probably thinking of longevity. But then when you have the Next Generation and Voyager, you look back at TOS and you think, it's a mess. They got this Space Central in one episode. They got USPA. Didn't they abbreviate USPA in one episode?
Yeah. I mean, and of course, then you got the United Federation of Peoples.
Well, that's a whole other thing. That wasn't that one book.
We couldn't get it straight.
Wasn't that the Peter Pan book?
Was it what?
Peter Pan, didn't that children's company put that, or was that another one?
I think it was Peter Pan, yeah.
Because they said Peter Pan usually puts some generic fairy tale artwork on the back of their stuff, but they had this they said, oh, look for all these new Star Trek things, like all these new Star Trek books coming out. Because they put two stories together. One was about Atlantis. I remember it was about Atlantis was the second one, which was actually a little bit better because they still had the blondes Uhura, but they weren't into this Federation of People stuff.
Yeah.
I think they actually mentioned Federation of Planets, but Kirk mentioned that in that first one.
Yeah.
Federation of Peoples. You know, we're Federation of Peoples, and we have to activate our detector circuits, you know?
You know, I remember they also had another name for impulse. They called it Space Normal Speed.
Space Normal Speed, that's it, not Impulse Speed.
Yeah. And so, you know, my friends and I, when we was, you know, in our teens, you know, we were always trying to argue what that was. And I just said, look, it's just, you know, they didn't have the name impulse at the time. And they, you know, because warp speed is obviously you're altering the space around the ship to make it move. So that would be space abnormal speed.
And space, and the impulse is just like an advanced kind of rocket engine, something like that.
Yeah, it's like that. And I remember I remember Spock called them and was rockets. Remember he goes switch to rockets. Remember when they were being held by
rockets?
Now
we're into rockets. We got circuits. We got rockets now.
The impulse engines were called rockets in the yeah. So you know, we don't. I mean, there was
that in TOS?
Huh?
Was that in TOS?
Yeah, in the cage.
Oh.
When the Telosians were holding the ship, and they weren't able to.
You know, we've opened up a whole new rabbit hole here. So apparently, never mind these stories, we have rockets to deal with now. At least in the Next Generation, they didn't come out and say, "Okay, we got to get out of here. Let's get our rockets on this Enterprise D." Maybe that does explain Gold Key, though.
Yeah, because
maybe he caught us. We're rockets, so there's some rocket engines on this ship, you know.
Yeah, because Spock said they were rockets, and that's why we got flames coming out the warp nacelles, you know, because they figured that's the rockets. But no, that's not the rockets that he's talking about, you know.
So, like I said, unless we can just kind of call it 23rd century colloquialism, like, well, you know, Starfleet people, they have this impulse drive, but they also call it rockets, and they also call it space normal speed, so.
Yeah.
Or maybe, well, I mean, you know, and again, in Star Trek The Next Generation, when Riker is de-evolving and literally becoming less intelligent, he even remembers to refer to the sensor properly. He's telling Geordi to take care of that sensor thing. He doesn't remember what it is, but he doesn't say, oh, Geordi, take care of that detector circuit.
Yeah.
So obviously, that was just like, whatever, you know, it didn't mean anything to the story. So I guess the story of circuits in Star Trek, would you say it comes down to just total discontinuity in the writing? That they just...
Yeah, I mean, you know, they just, like, the technobabble couldn't keep up with the writing. They, you know, they were pumping out stories, and, you know, they just had to, you know, probably on their own, they had to come up with something on their own, basically. To
or either that or Gene just liked the idea of putting circuits in every script he wrote.
Yeah.
Because Core, I can't remember what he said, but Core noticed something wrong in the engineering. He said, it has to be the circuit.
Yeah.
So, and remember, they'd often refer to the circuit as this very generic, bland thing. Like, they wouldn't say, oh, well, there's a problem with the engineering. They just say, oh, it's the circuit. Like, the circuit. Like, what's the circuit?
Yeah. Is it... You know, I just figured, you know, because when, you know, in Star Trek 2, when the Reliant gets hit, you know...
the wires!
You know, by Kirk's belated phaser strike, Khan is standing underneath what appears to be a garbage dump of wires.
Isn't there some rocks coming out of that, too?
Yeah, I mean, it was just, I mean, and I just assumed that was your circuit right there. All these were circuits landing on Khan. You know, and I was like,
like rocks, so
towards rocks were coming out, and it was like, you know how in the hell did they manage to cram all that stuff, you know, in the top of the bridge, and it's like, you know, you hit something on the bridge, and he didn't actually hit the bridge. You know, if you see the phaser blast, it misses the bridge by like a hinge. And hits right around where the impulse, the crystal housing was in the back where the impulse drive is.
You mean the rockets?
Yeah, where the rockets. Yeah.
Okay.
And so they take this massive amount of damage on the bridge, you know, and I'm like, you know, geez. But actually, and then later in the movie where Kirk fires and they actually hit the bridge, they kind of nick it on the side. A whole door blows out from the turbo lift. and a big beam falls down on top of one of the crew members, and it's like, well, how come there's no air escaping?
Well, there was
they didn't have any force field
containment fields, didn't they?
They didn't have that time. They only had it in Next Generation.
Maybe they put the screens up. Maybe they had the screens that protected them from that thing, you know.
It reminded me of that movie, The Black Hole, where the ship was made out of plastic, and you know, it had because you could see it was like canvas walls and everything, and they were being sucked into the black hole, and the ship was breaking up, but everybody had air. They were crawling around outside the ship.
Well, there's an old movie.
Yeah.
It's actually incomplete because there's parts missing, called Lost Horizon. It's about a group of people who end up at Shangri-La.
Yeah.
It's an old movie. And they're on this plane. It's like a DC-10. But there's one problem. It's the 30s, so I guess the Depression, I kind of forgive that. But the DC-10 inside is wood finish, like Cheers, like the bar.
Yeah.
Okay, so that isn't quite right for a DC-10. DC-10 is metallic. So anyway, this woman who's having this nervous breakdown, they're in mid-flight. They're, I don't know how many thousand feet in the air. They're over this Arctic area. She opens the door in mid-flight and doesn't get sucked out. She just, like, opens the door like, what's out there? And they pull her back. And it's like, you know, and the water's like, no, this is a DC-10. It doesn't have wood paneling. She's going to open the door like, oh, it's just a plane. Or it's just the air. I'll close the door. She's going to be... That's not how physics work.
I think they did something like that on the Three Stooges, if I remember right.
Yeah, this was not a comedy. This was a kind of a lightweight science fiction thing. But she opens the door and is like, nothing's... Like, no, don't do that. Well, nothing happened to her. Maybe that's the whole thing with the Reliant. Like, oh, the door blows off. Who cares? They can still breathe.
Yeah.
Whatever. They got the screen up or whatever. Or a circuit protects it. I don't know what happens, you know. But like I said, the thing with the Reliant, there was years ago I was talking to a friend who had said that if you look at that scene, whenever they hit one part of the ship, another part of the ship seems to blow up.
Yeah.
Was that the reason?
They'd hit the, like, they do like damage to, like, let's say the warp nacelle or something like that. Something on the bridge would blow up.
Right, and then they show one scene where they attack that little thing above where the torpedoes come out of, and you see the explosion in the corridor.
Yeah, yeah.
Like everything doesn't work quite right.
Corridor. I mean, there is no corridor in that thing. That's just an optional brace.
Yeah, I mean, who wired that ship? I mean, why would an explosion in the torpedo section affect something on deck 3 or 4 or whatever?
Yeah, really.
I mean, that ship is wired. Oh, that has wires. Maybe that's why the wires circuit everything.
The damage in the circuit will just travel down the length of the ship. And
there you go. The circuit's at fault. The circuit's causing trouble. It travels down the circuit into the wires. It blows up another part of the ship.
I know they call the bridge the nerve center of the ship, but that's just a figure of speech. They don't mean it literally. I mean, it's like
you have wires that connect the rest of the ship. I mean, on Voyager, I will say if they attacked an area of the ship, that area exploded. They wouldn't attack the shuttle bay, and you wouldn't see sick bay blow up.
Yeah.
You know, but the Reliant was a mess. They would hit one part, and the other part would blow up.
Yeah.
And then you'd hit a door on the bridge, and everybody would be fine. Well, not fine, but they wouldn't be breathing.
Yeah. I mean,
so
so
that was a messy battle. It's like, what's wrong with that ship?
Yeah.
You know, is there some failure in there where everything just gets misdirected? Maybe it's kind of like that that thing in the Next Generation where they had that life form that was kind of an inorganic crystalline thing, and it would redirect light everywhere else in the ship.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that.
I don't know. They didn't have that on the Reliant, but unless Khan went in that ship and screwed it all up, like if he went in there, and because if you remember, you pointed out that he had wires all over him anyway.
Yeah, I mean, he had him on his arm. Remember, I don't know what it was for, but he had a communicator.
Marionette puppets? I don't know.
He had a big old cord. It looked like he ripped out of a TV set or something. He had it traveling up his arm, and it's like, what is that for? Maybe
Khan wasn't a guy who was into circuits. Maybe he was into wires. Maybe Khan's thing is that I don't like the Reliance circuits or whatever it is. I don't like the way they function, so I'll just install wires and everything.
Yeah.
I'm going to use it.
Yeah, I think at the time Harv Bennett was doing. Didn't he work a little bit on Star Trek too? Harv Bennett, wasn't he in charge?
Well, I just recently found out that he was a big writer on the Mod Squad in the 60s and 70s. Yeah. So, but I don't know. He worked on Star Trek. I think was it 2? I think it was he started.
Yeah, I think because I'm pretty sure he was in there somewhere.
I know Nicholas Meyer was. I know he was involved in that.
And I think back to his $6 million man days, and I'm thinking maybe this is what he was trying to, imply what Khan, with this wire going up his arm and everything. It's like, it seemed like some kind of throwback from his $6 million man days.
Unless the idea is that Khan had some electrical components, and in order to be genetically perfect, he had to recharge with wires. I mean, but then again, whenever you saw Khan, using his abilities, he always did this stuff.
Yeah.
Like this Khan, I call it Khan Chi.
Khan Chi.
Like Tai Chi is like this karate Khan stuff, and then he'd open the door. He didn't do that in the second movie, though. He wasn't doing all this hand stuff.
No, he was basically just sitting in the command chair, and he was just trying to keep the ship going for Kirk all the time
with its wires. I guess he had wires on that too. So,
and you never actually see the Reliant actually go to warp during that whole movie.
Yeah, you just see it move around, I guess, with base normal speed.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think. I mean, they were, when he first attacked the Enterprise, they had to be pretty close to the regular one station because they didn't have any warp drive after that. So how they got there, before the Enterprise did, I mean.
But like I said, I guess, like I said, again, discontinuity in the writing. And I guess that the circuit thing represents that because in TOS, I guess it's like there's an old joke about Xena and Xena fandom. If things don't make sense in Xena, a wizard did it.
Oh, you're talking about when that Hercules spinoff there was Xena the Warrior Princess?
Yeah, and there was an old thing about fandom. If somebody asked Lucy Lawless or another actress or writer why this happened, they say, a wizard did it.
Yeah.
It was kind of an easy joke. So I guess with the circuit, it's like, I just inserted that in there. Somebody did it, Roddenberry or whatever. And the circuit's responsible for this and that, or the screens or whatever. So like I said, when you get into Voyager, everything's very defined. You've got these Heisenberg compensators, and you've got these bioneural gel packs, and you've got this this warp core, and you've got these field generators, and you've got what Geordi said in All Good Things. We've got a problem with the phase inducers, I think was one of them, right?
Yeah.
And all these really, I guess, techno-babbly terms. But
I mean, unfortunately, it was only by then when they started to actually get the lingo down.
Right, so with Voyager, they really had it kind of down pat.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of what it was. And, I recently watched a video by my friend Steve Shives. Hi, Steve. I'm sharing this with you. I know you're watching it. Where he was talking about one of his issues with Voyager, one of his personal issues was technobabble. And, that's subjective opinion. I agree with that, if that's your opinion. But it just, to me, it kind of testified that Star Trek had correlated what it was.
Yeah.
That, Voyager didn't have to say, oh, we're detecting the caretaker's array on our detector circuit.
Yeah.
Or you didn't hear Tuvok say, we're having a malfunction in our port rocket.
Yeah.
What I mean? It would have sounded weird by Voyager if they still had rockets and we have to get back to USPA. I mean, it would have sounded weird using all these weird terms again.
Yeah.
So everything was the next generation, I think, by the time they get their legs, really codified things.
Yeah.
Although the detector circuit,
yeah,
who knows? And that was just randomness.
It was still, I think even by then it was still being settled down. But, during the movies, though, they really didn't, as far as I know, they really didn't mess it up too much.
No, except the screen thing, but they didn't really go too.
But I think if you look at who wrote what during the movies, I don't think Roddenberry really wrote
that Reliant battle. I mean, we could go into this. I think it was you who mentioned this about Nick Meyer, that he tended to be kind of obsessed with grand military tradition and action sequences that were epic.
Yeah.
And I think maybe he got so carried away with his big epic scenes that he forgot where things in the ship were supposed to hit and where they were supposed to.
This is where I disagree with a lot of Trek fans. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, he really brought it back to life, Star Trek, with his vision of it and stuff like that. But, it just seemed to me when you watch Star Trek the motion picture and then you go to Star Trek 2, you notice there's a
the vibe is different.
It's a step back. And you see that the uniforms aren't bright and anything. They're just dark and morbid looking, and they sort of look like some old-fashioned British kind of looking thing where it's red and it's I mean, it's not the ideal outfit you would
Right.
wear in space.
And the communicators are monsters. I think we discussed that. They're these huge things.
They got big and black, and they
Yeah, they were these big metal boxes. They looked like toys or like prefab erector set.
What they look like are hinges. The antenna that flips out, it's just a black thing, and it looks like a hinge to a big door, and it's just big. And but they're still using the wrist communicators, because you remember Captain from the Reliant there, he had one.
Trell.
Yeah, he was still wearing his.
Yeah, he bit his off because of the eel in his head.
So there was a mix and match of it. The phasers they were still using from the motion picture. They still had those phasers.
Right, they didn't have giant bulky things. Yeah. They had the motion picture phasers. And the motion picture tricorders, they had them too, if I recall.
Yeah, but yeah, overall, I mean, you look at the interior of the ship. It was dark. They had to paint everything dark and subdued because the uniforms from the motion picture wouldn't have blended very well in that environment. So when they did that, they had to change everything around, the whole look of it. That's why the bridge was so dark, and I didn't like that. It just seemed, it's like too gothic, for Star Trek. I mean, that's not the way because when you go to the Next Generation, everything's all lit up.
Well, I was going to make that point just as an aside about Next Generation. Yeah. I kind of felt the way about First Contact, too. They made the ship a little too dark. They made the uniforms gray.
Yeah,
and, I mean, with Star Trek 2, I guess I remember everybody kind of complaining that I knew that they looked like they were wearing pajamas in the first movie.
Yeah, but the thing is, I like those uniforms because it was like the callback to the TOS uniforms, which were
I didn't mind them too much. I especially like Kirk's Admiral one.
Yeah,
it was really nice.
It was like, well, yeah, it's not so drastic a change where you went from the shirt and pants to these big heavy jackets and these thousands of pins, that they're wearing on their uniform that fall off when they get into a fight. It's like they made it simple. It's just you got the braids on the sleeves. And you got a badge, and then you got the little pins on the shoulder. That's enough, and you just have, it looks like a fabric that's, futuristic looking. It doesn't look like wool, like when they take wool and they comb it down. I mean, looks heavy.
I know it may not be everybody's agreement, even you, but yeah. I have the same feeling, even though they weren't comfortable, apparently, about the TNG jumpsuit stuff. I mean, I always felt those were a little more futuristic, but... Yeah. But I didn't mind any of the TOS uniforms, really. They looked all right. But I always felt those First Contact era ones, like Deep Space Nine, later Deep Space Nine, were a little too bulky and dull. They made the colorful part lesser, and they made these, I call them Joan Crawford Romulan shoulder pads. You remember how the Romulans had those Joan Crawford shoulder pads?
Yeah.
They were really epic.
Those uniforms reminded me of what auto mechanics wear. I mean, they looked like...
You mean the First Contact era ones?
No, Deep Space Nine. When they was wearing those all.
Oh, you mean the Voyager era ones?
Yeah, though they kind of reminded me of auto mechanics.
Oh yeah, those ones I didn't mind so much. They did have kind of a more industrial look.
Yeah, and it's like, well, that would be like something you would see like an engineer or
right. And it's funny that they kind of switch everybody over to that look.
Yeah,
because that was the Voyager look. They had that outfit. The one I'm talking about is that it's similar, but it's gray here, and they have this little colorful.
Yeah.
Dickie, I think it's a Dickie.
Yeah, well,
or undershirt, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, when they took it off, they had like a vest or something, and then
right. But the base shirt was very gray.
Yeah.
And that reminded me a little of Nick Meyer in the sense that they made the Enterprise E less attractive inside, and they made the uniforms less attractive. Where and if you're right on Star Trek 2 when they did the bridge in the motion picture, it was maybe dim, but it was kind of romantic dim. I don't know another way to describe it, but
and when they did Star Trek 3, you could tell that Leonard Nimoy was directing that because the bridge was all lit up.
Right, he had the lights everywhere.
Right, and then you saw the problem with the uniforms trying to mesh with the environment. It didn't work.
Right, because in Star Trek 2, the lighting was all kind of brownish.
Yeah, I mean, because the bridge had to be dark for the uniforms to look like they belong there. But when you go into Star Trek 3, they're still wearing the same uniforms from Star Trek 2, but now the bridge is all lit up and it looks brighter. And then you see, well, wait a minute, that doesn't look right visually because these uniforms just look out of place.
Maybe those little weird buttons on the Star Trek that you said came off in the Star Trek 2 fight.
When Kirk was fighting David Marcus here, and on the moon,
Buttons are flying off.
and he's sitting there swinging at David, and you could hear the pins coming off the sleeves of his coat, hitting the floor. And I'm like, that's really nice. I mean, right there, you got all these pins for how many years he's been in service, and every single one of them suckers is going to fall off before this fight is done. And he'd be spending the rest of the movie picking them up off the floor and putting them back. It's like, come on.
So the TOS, that was mostly everything was patch in that. They had big patches on everything and sewed on stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't have Kirk covered in pins.
Yeah. I mean, he had pins on his big jacket. He had pins under that jacket. I mean, it was, it's like, how many pins do you really need to have on a uniform when you're in the future?
I think, again, with Nick, maybe, who knows? Maybe underneath that there were circuits. I don't know.
And to put insult to injury, when we will go into Star Trek 6, you have Colonel West. He not only does he have all the pins, but he's got all the ribbons.
Yeah, the ribbons. And René Auberjonois?
Huh?
From Deep Space Nine when he played Colonel West?
From Star Trek 6.
Yeah, wasn't that René Auberjonois?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, Odo. And didn't he have like TOS kind of stripes or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, you had all these the chest ribbons like you'd see in modern day military. I mean,
and Nick Meyer was on that too. I think with Nick Meyer, when I look at his stuff, yeah, my friend Henrique was one who mentioned it about Discovery. Henrique felt that Nick Meyer, he was obsessed with naval pageantry.
Yeah, I guess
he loved the ribbons and the whole martial look of everything. So, and in the end, he kind of made his characters up to look like some 23rd century version of Squire Trelane. Just because remember how naval gauche he was, everything kind of Napoleonic.
Yeah.
Like this display of rank and all this stuff. And I think that's what he wanted to do. Like, we're gonna put tons of pins on Kirk and everything with ribbons, and all this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I know on TOS they had a dress uniform for Kirk, and it had some.
No, the clusters, but those are patches, right?
The only time that you saw that, the dress uniform always looked different than the duty uniform. But in the movies, which was the dress uniform? It was all the same uniform, and
everything was all dressy. Did they have a dress uniform in movie era?
I don't think they did. I mean, it was like, they had the same uniform was also the dress uniform, and in the naval they don't wear your dress uniform 24 hours a day. You have a duty uniform, and if on special occasions you get to wear your dress uniform, and that has all the ribbons. And
apparently that giant thing with all the buttons and the clips survived in a more modified form into the TNG era, because on the Stargazer, what they would do is they kind of turned that uniform into a scant.
Yeah. And
what they did is they opened up this big area of the sleeve, but they still put all the buttons and stuff on it.
Yeah.
And didn't the Enterprise C still have the straight up Star Trek II stuff?
Yeah. Basically.
So that went on for 50, 60 years, that uniform?
Yeah, very overused. I mean, considering how many times they changed it, But
one thing, I'm surprised when they did the Enterprise C, they didn't just have the old TNG jumpsuits.
It looked sloppy on the Enterprise C when they took that turtleneck out. It's like somebody wearing a big heavy coat and they have nothing on underneath.
Yeah, because Jack Crusher in that holodeck program had that open thing, and it was just a little scant with buttons all over it.
Yeah, I mean, I know they were trying to say this is before Next Generation, but couldn't they come up with some other kind of uniform?
Well, I'm wondering why they didn't just have some variation of that TNG jumpsuit.
Yeah, or maybe just like something basic,
Or even better, something totally different, but maybe like the TNG jumpsuit, only without the black on the top, like a solid red up here. And because you said one of the guys in that show was tapping on his badge.
Yeah. At some point, I can't remember where that was now.
It was, I think, Lieutenant Castile. So, so I guess when you get down to the circuit thing, it certainly just becomes a big punchline after a while. But it shows you, because Star Trek fans, they love to point out incongruity. It's weird. You love a show, but maybe it's like a romance. You meet somebody you love, and then you get to know them, and you want to change it sometimes. Maybe with Star Trek, people they love this show, but they look at it and they think, oh, this isn't quite right. Or maybe it's love. Maybe it's the whole idea that we love this show so much, we want it to be close to perfect.
Well, okay. I understand where you're coming from, but
I'm just speculating on fans. I don't know. I don't know every fan.
It would be nice if the writers would talk to each other, and then discuss what was done.
That could go with it. You love a show so much, you wish the writers would respect it as much as you do.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, we can't do this because in this episode we weren't able to do that, and it's like, well, it would be nice if you guys would discuss this before you.
Yeah, because you alluded to that you think there should be more fan involvement with the show, and there should have been more fan.
Because we're the only ones that's watching these things consecutively, episode to episode. We're not just getting our paycheck, writing one episode, and then we don't come back for a month or so. We're watching these every single week they come out. So we mentally we know the continuity, and if there's something not right, we're going to pick up. We're the first to pick up.
Well, there could be a whole series of podcasts again on the inconsistencies in Enterprise.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there's a guy that wrote like 4 or 5 books here on that. I mean, it's like.
And the thing about Enterprise too is that by then they had internet BBS, they had chat rooms. By that point, I think didn't they have like rudimentary social networks at that point, like Friendster when Enterprise came out?
Yeah.
So you could have they had podcasting. I know that much. I don't know if they called it video conferencing then. They could have bought fans in at that point and had them consult with Enterprise. They could have done it then. It would have been very easy. They didn't have to fly everybody up. They could have done it online.
After about 25 years, you would think that some of the fans would have, that really like Star Trek would have been working at some point in some way on the show, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and the problem with Enterprise, it was a prequel. So we knew the technology was going to happen.
Yeah.
Yet they messed a lot of things up.
Yeah.
Like,
and they get mad at us because we pointed out and they say, "Oh, you guys are just too critical."
I mean, the thing comes up, you're just geeky people, that you're obsessed with it.
They just slap us down like they don't want to hear it,
And I'll think, no, we love this. We love this show. Maybe more than you do because you're not consulting with each other.
Yeah.
Is it a paycheck for you? Are you just collecting the money, or do you care about this? That's what my vibe sometimes is. That, is this just all, going through the motions for you? Do you care about what this thing is? Because you're creating a whole world. Yeah. A whole galaxy, and like I said, like in Enterprise, for example, I see the first episode and they have a view screen on Enterprise.
Yeah,
and I think
actually have conferences,
right? And I think this is pre-Romulan War, and Spock clearly said there was no ship-to-ship visual communication. Yeah. That's the first thing I noticed. They messed that up.
Yeah,
unless they explain it like, well, this is an experiment that may not work. It was part of starships.
Yeah.
If I recall, didn't one of those freighters have that too?
Well, I remember what was it, Archer and one of the other captains from one of those lesser advanced Starfleet ships. Remember when they was racing back to Earth and that Klingon ship, Durus ship, was chasing them, and then the other ship chased them off. Well, he was speaking to the other captain via the view screen, right? So there you go, ship-to-ship visual communication right there. And
yep, they messed up canon. Right up, pretty much out of the box.
That's right.
And they were doing that with a Klingon ship, I think, in the second episode, or some other ship. They were communicating with them that way, or a Vulcan ship. And I thought, nope. And now it's like, okay, so the Romulans didn't have it. Is that how we're supposed to believe this? That it was their side that didn't have it?
Or maybe they just didn't want to make contact. But that would be kind of awkward.
And then again, also, we have to assume spatial torpedoes are atomic, because Spock said they used atomic weapons in those days.
Yeah, that's right. And none of the weapons they was using had nuclear cores, as far as I know. In the weapons, the armory they called it.
Right. So, and they also said it had no quarter, no captive. Well, Enterprise had quarters. It had captive. It had a brig, if I recall.
Yeah.
So basically, none of what Spock said was true, and Vulcans don't lie.
Yeah.
Eesh. Ooh, messy.
That was the bottle. That was the corner that they put themselves in when they want to do a prequel series that takes place 100 years before TOS, because
you have that information there.
You've got a lot of stuff that you're going to have to make sure you don't step on. And right off, the fans knew they were going to screw it up.
Although Spock did say, by our standards today.
Yeah. But
so I don't know. Maybe that was how they looked at it.
Yeah.
The NX-01 was a very quaint ship to them.
Yeah. But at the same time, when we see the NX-01, it looks a little past you know, where it should, you know, it just looked a little too advanced for the 22nd century
Well, I've heard fans recently say that they speculate that the JJ universe, that Enterprise is the history of that universe.
Yeah, I heard that too.
I mean, it's weird. In the Mirror universe, they capture a Prime Universe Connie, but you know, but I mean, but they work Riker into it.
Yeah, that was just a complaining thing. Oh, blame it on Riker because he was the one that created the whole thing.
That's almost the was it Dynasty, the Patrick Duffy thing.
Sort of, yeah. It was.
And that's almost like, oh, it's all Riker's holodeck fantasy program.
Yeah.
The next one looked nothing like this. This is just Riker fantasizing.
Which is really ridiculous because, you know, with the kind of computer technology they had even in the 22nd century, most of the data would have been pretty accurate and accurately kept into the 23rd century and the 24th. I mean, because, you know, it's not like they take a Polaroid and it just deteriorates in 200 years. They had digital cameras. They had, you know, all this stuff was stored on files and, you know, and.
Right, exactly. And it's like they created this pitch-perfect replica of the TOS Connie Bridge. Scotty. Yeah, it was pitch perfect.
That goes way back, you know, and they still got it right.
I mean, unless that was what it looked like, or I don't know. It just, that was a weird ending. And that ship had circuits, but I don't know. It would be weird to think that Enterprise NX-01 looked nothing like that, and Riker just decided to spice it up. His own Kelvin universe, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, I mean, for all we know, NX-01 looked more like a Daedalus class ship, and they had no gravity. The real one. Yeah. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
And they walked around with boots. I don't know. It would be weird if they revisited it and said, oh, yeah, remember that Enterprise you saw? That was Riker's holodeck fantasy. There was a real arc. There was a real T'Pol, but the Enterprise didn't look anything like that. The stories weren't that sketchy. They didn't have a view screen. It wasn't anything like that. And you know, maybe it was only Warp 3. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Riker could have just been saying, oh, I wish it was this way, and this is how the Federation was signed, and the ship was this way. I don't know. Because it did really, if you look at it, it looked more like a post-TOS ship.
Yeah.
I don't know if NX-01 looked on the outside TNG-ish, but it didn't look quite, I don't know.
Well, right off the bat, everybody knew it was an Akira class redesigned.
They called it Akira Prize, I believe.
Yeah.
But then again, that's TV Guide. Didn't they show like an overhead view of it, and it just didn't quite...
Yeah. A lot of people had a problem with that. You know, just...
Well, if I recall, I think John Eves was talking on Trek Yards about it, and he had said that, well, he wanted a very different-looking ship, but they said, we wanted it to look Star Trek-like, so have the saucer. What's that? The Akira, make it look like that.
Yeah. Well, what he should have done was dump all the years of concept designs on his desk and said, all of this is also Star Trek.
Right. They should have got the Matt Jeffrey stuff out, or whatever.
Let's flip through these pages here, and we can come up with something, and it's going to look Star Trek. You know.
I would have gone back to the Matt Jeffries thing.
Yeah.
I mean, remember that TOS model that had like 3 engines or warp nacelles, rockets, whatever, and it had like a ball and a little sonar thing.
Yeah.
What if they made NX-01 look like a souped-up version of that?
Yeah.
That fit the era more.
Yeah.
Or a Daedalus class ship even, or something like that. But they said no. But I know they're thinking it's going to identify with people who watch it, so they'll watch it and we can advertise whatever. But
they underestimate the fans. They would have watched it. You know, it would have appealed to them that they're following canon here because the ship doesn't really resemble the Enterprise that much. I mean, it still has the shapes and the warp nacelles, and the cylinder kind of secondary hull, and it has a different primary hull, but it's still essentially, you'd recognize it as a Federation or a Starfleet kind of hull.
Right. Or if you really wanted to get abstract, it wouldn't be as recognizable if there was pre-Federation. They could have made it that ship on the motion picture.
Yeah.
Not that wouldn't be weird, but I mean, if it's a non-Star Federation ship, why not just go all the way?
Yeah.
That would make sense, or some variation of that, something different.
Yeah.
The inside actually didn't look too bad. I mean, the steel beaminess of it and the everything being very push button, but the outside of it just, the design was a little too, I don't know. But like I said, I think Enterprise, would you say that was kind of getting into the era where they were kind of messing with the timeline a little bit? which they're doing a lot now, but
yeah, I mean, right from the beginning.
like barely prime.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, they could have saved all that stuff for later and just kind of focused on just the thing about the Klingon visiting Earth. Because, like they said, what was it? What episode was it where they said that the first contact with the Klingons ended in disaster? I think it was Captain Picard said something like that.
Yeah, he was talking about Prime Directive, yeah.
Yeah, the Prime Directive, and they said, because we had a disastrous first contact with the Klingons. Well, that could have been like in that part there in the Enterprise where that Klingon crashes on Earth, and that would have been sort of what he was referencing to,
I don't believe this. We were talking about circuits almost comically, and we opened up this ginormous rabbit hole of discontinuity that just. Yeah, I guess the circuit just opens that right up because
it's a slippery slope. Because when you start on the discontinuity of things of Star Trek, you're going to go right in the rabbit hole, like you said, just like a toilet.
Like I said, you wonder. Even in TOS, I mean, I know DC Fontana has memoirs. I know Matt Jeffries does. I read Robert Justman's. I haven't read all of them. Yeah. And Robert Justman did indicate there were some schisms with the writers. The writers would have an idea. Gene would veto some of them. He would not veto others. And some of the writers would have tiffs and not want to talk to each other. And I think maybe they all should have had a writers' pool and came together and said, okay, this is not Space Command. This is Starfleet, and this is the Federation, and we don't use screens or circuits or leeches. We use whatever.
You gotta use something more different. You gotta use something different now. This is the future.
And Vulcan wasn't conquered. Thank you. They could have. Don't know, because that was just weird that they mentioned Vulcan being conquered.
I hear somebody say, "Oh, there's something wrong with the picture tube on the view screen." I mean, you don't.
What pictures? What
picture tube? They wouldn't use the term picture tube on the view screen because they didn't have picture tube.
They used picture tube on TOS?
No, I'm saying they wouldn't use it because because picture tubes are on TVs in the 20th century. But by the time in the future, it's all different now. It's not picture tubes.
If circuits really into discontinuity, we mentioned this earlier while we were at lunch. This is a side thing. The little view screens, the gray view screens they had in conference lounges and in quarters.
Yeah.
What were? Oh, looks like Kat came for a visit.
It's smoky. She's got circuits coming out of her face here.
Okay. The cat circuit. And with V'ger, it's the cat unit.
Yeah.
So, it's cat unit. He just sent V'ger the information because he expects an answer. Anyway, but I wanted to mention those little view screens on the gray view screens on TOS. Yeah. I'm trying to think, what were those made of? You mentioned this earlier. In The Enemy Within, one of the first episodes, Kirk knocks it down, and you mentioned you hear glass shatter, you hear a bunch of things blowing up, and he's, I'm Captain Kirk!
You actually saw a spark flying out of that thing when he knocked it out. Remember, there was like a flash of light where it's like he pulled it right out of the wire. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a big, heavy thing in that. We flash forward a season later to a mug time. Now, in this context, Spock is going through the Pumthar. He's throwing plumbing soup at Chapel and just being erratic and wanting to go to Vulcan and resetting the ship and kind of going out of his head. But anyway, in his quarters, Uhura's, I think, isn't she announcing they're not going to Vulcan or something?
Yeah, she was saying something over that thing. And
right. So then, and it's the same unit that Kirk pushed over and the glass shattered. So Spock takes his Vulcan human hand, crushes it into a foil pulp. Was there like a fake diorama version of it you had in your quarters decoration, or is that the low budget version?
It looked like it deflated, with the way he pounded it down.
Okay, we gave Kirk the really good one, we gave Spock the really cheap one. Like, he gets
the rubber one. The
aluminum foil one, like the little Happy Meal box cardboard. We put the circuits in it.
I mean,
all the stuff, and we just give them the cardboard background, so we try to take boom, boom, boom.
I mean, if they took the effort to make it look like Kirk actually busted something real, why didn't they bother? Like,
yeah, I mean, if they'd done it that way, they could have done Kirk knocked out on the floor and had it crumple up like a foil ball.
Yeah.
rather than you get boom, glass shattering. It's like boom, boom, boom. It just kind of explodes. I mean, I always see a little air puff like boom come out of that thing.
Yeah.
And there was no glass either. Was there glass on that thing?
Well, yeah. I mean, you heard it when the evil Kirk smashed that.
Well, no. When Spock was crushing it.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can't crush something like
I didn't
that.
hear any glass.
It's got a glass front on it. I mean, you're going to see that pop out or shatter, and you didn't see that. It's just all together. It just.
Now that I think about that, I noticed that. I noticed that thing a long time ago when I watched that on TV. You know, Amok Time back on I think ABC was rerunning it. Remember they were running it in the 90s at some point. Well, I was watching it and I saw Kirk knock that down, screen blow up. I didn't notice the detector circuit, but I noticed when Spock's punching it, it just implodes. And I thought, what? And I'm 10.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm 10, 11 years old, and that's like, no. Something's not right. This is a cardboard screen now.
It didn't look right. It's like it's that same kind of question when Kirk beats Khan on the floor with that.
Oh, the stick thing.
You know, what the hell? What kind of tool was that he pulls out of the?
Well, like I told you, if I recall, it was like a Nerf thing.
Yeah.
And Ricardo apparently, allegedly, I think I heard somewhere that he thought it tickled or whatever. But you know, he's supposed to be you know, he's hurt. But it's like, it's like being hit with a deck of cards, you know, because it looked chintzy and plasticky.
Yeah.
Like a Nerf bat. And it's supposed to be solid metal, and it's kind of a gray, toyish color.
Yeah, and you could tell he wasn't really hitting him with it that hard because his outfit that Ricardo was wearing, you could see it was just lightly.
Yeah, I always expect when it was HD to see the words LA Little League written on it or something. Like it was a bat, a plastic bat, and they just put the thing on it so it looked like it was a heavy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know why. It looked like some big...
Right, and Kirk was handling it in a very flimsy way. It wasn't like it was any effort taking that out.
Yeah.
It was like, boom, and Ricardo's hurt, Khan's hurt by this. And I'm thinking, it's a piece of plastic. I mean, Kirk's barely holding the thing.
I mean, here Kirk he was throwing himself around like William Shatner usually does.
Yeah, you're right. He just throws himself in the air, yeah.
He was hanging on to the fence like that goes to the warp engines or somewhere, the impulse drive rather. And he's got his legs wrapped around Ricardo's neck. Okay, now he throws himself down, and that throws Ricardo over like that. Now, if he could do that, right, and he didn't get hurt, then how does taking this thing out and just hitting him once in the stomach?
Right. Well, you know, if they wanted it to look effective, I'm going to show you an X-Acto knife as metallic. They should have painted it up like that, and had it look and had Shadow like he's some effort holding it. But he pulls it out like it's just nothing, and it's like he's barely tapping him, if I recall. He's barely tapping Khan.
He didn't. Yeah, it doesn't matter because he doesn't have to actually hit him with it. Even if they got something that was like aluminum or something like that and made it, I mean, it's just you're not going to actually put it into him like that. You're just going to hit it.
Yeah, he was like boom, and then Ricardo's like, you know, it's like he wasn't even really going that hard on him.
But like you said, it didn't look real. This thing looked.
It looked nerfy. It looked like a Nerf bat or something. Yeah. Oh, it's like one of those. Remember, back in the day, they used to have a playground, those wiffle ball-y things that it would be in a pole, and you know, it was like some chintzy playground thing. I don't know, but that's another incongruity in that sense. But
I don't really see them ever use that thing again.
You know, the Shatner fighting scenes is a whole other incongruity because that's his own thing. You know, the whole thing of Shatner fighting scenes were to be, as much as I can just kind of leap into scenes, that's cool.
You can't even say that was the time of the way people fight back in the TV shows today. That wasn't cowboy fighting.
Well, that was Shatner's own thing. Now, to me, that
was like maybe like bungee wrestling or something. What the hell?
Yeah, Shatner had a unique fighting mechanic. You know,
I mean, maybe they didn't have choreography or whatever they call it. Over. Like what they do is when they have like a Star Wars fight, they have to train the actors how to actually,
because they have laser swords, and they're supposed to. Didn't they have like metal staffs they had to use to when they put that saber in?
Oh, you're talking about
Star Wars.
Vulcan there, or when they was
no Star Wars, where they had the lightsaber fights. You mentioned that
they had like a metal. It was like a metal rod or something, which they later.
Right, they had the lightsaber bottom, but they had a metal rod on it, so they would put the lightsaber thing over it.
Yeah, but they had to teach them a skill on how to use that thing so it looked legitimate on the screen.
Right, so they weren't Shatner fighting and grappling each other with their knees and jumping around for no reason.
It did not look legitimate. It's like, if I got into a fight, I would not fight like that. Okay,
anybody would.
You know, like, especially when he was fighting that Andorian in the corner. That was like the funniest fight scene.
And Jerry the Babel? Oh, man.
Yeah. I mean, it was so over the top. I mean, you could see the scuff marks all over the floor where they had to do these things over and over again. He's got, you know, because his boots had black soles on them, and they put marks all over the floor and the wall.
You know, Shatner fighting, he's into a lot of this.
Yeah.
He does a lot of that. Like,
he does judo chops.
Yeah, he's like sizing up like he's going to take a photograph or something. He's not like, boom, boom, boom. Now, you know, say what you want about Kira's personality. When she fights, she actually fights. You know, she's not like, you know, she's not doing all this gestural stuff. I mean, it's like Kirk. I think he's like a Bond beginning. You know, you see some Bond films, and they're like, karate moves. Maybe this thing's like, oh, just boom, boom. You know, he's just like doing hand gestures.
His punches, you could see them a mile away. I mean, you know, he starts way back. When a person throws a punch, they don't start way back because, you know, you can.
You know, the thing is, with an alien, the Andorian in that scene, any alien could say, "I'll just let me get away while he's doing this." You know, and he's still there. Where's the Andorian? I'm gone. I'm away. Get you. You know.
Yeah.
I think with Shatner, whatever can get me in the screen the longest, I'll just.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm glad when they went into the Next Generation, the actors actually looked like they were trained.
Well, when they fought, and they had phasers. They did things with that, and they weren't really into fighting so much in the because I think that was really Shatner.
When they did have to, though, it looked like it was a...
Right, because they were trying to make it look like a real fight. They weren't... You notice that Picard...
Yeah.
You know, doing all that. I think that was Shatner. That had to be just him.
Even though Captain Picard couldn't fight worth a darn.
No, in Generations we saw that. I mean...
At least...
Malcolm McDowell almost killed him.
He was fighting, he knew how to fight, but he just wasn't very good at it, you know? Just, you know
now, in the Generations fight, I don't know. It seemed like Kirk later seemed like it was more real fighting. Because in Generations, I don't remember him doing all this stuff.
Yeah, well, he was just throwing roundhouses, basically, you know, and...
Yeah, just basically easy stuff, I guess, easy marks. Yeah. Like I said, there was a lot of... you know what I think it is? I think Shatner was a poser. You know? Because with the Gorn, there was a lot of posing in that Gorn fight.
Yeah.
Like, he'd get on his knees for a minute and size him up, and he'd have a rock or something, and then he'd sit there and do a little of that. It's like he was a poser, really. It was like, I'm going to fight you, but I got to pose, and, you know, like, you know, I mean, it's like, I got a camera. You know, I think that was the whole Shatner vibe was. Now, I mean, we didn't see Spock fighting all that much, but when he was on Vulcan, it was like, I'm out for blood, I got this thing, and now, okay, remember, in Blood Time, Spock's in the corner, like, and then all of a sudden, I'm fighting everybody, you know, and you know, and then even then, Kirk's like, you know, he's doing that hand thing. It's like, these guys could kill you.
Yeah.
You'd be off your feet while you're, you know, it's just, that's the way he fought, I guess. It's like, I have a posture and pose and whatever, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he just, like I said, they needed to have somebody, a technical advisor, maybe.
And then when they had the stunt double, even, like you said with Khan, it became more of a murderous ballet.
Yeah.
You know, they were doing the thing with the bottom of the, with the feet where he's over his neck and all that.
That would have killed Star Trek, too, if Kirk and Khan actually met and had to fight it out again. That would have ruined the whole movie.
And can you imagine Ricardo Montalban coming down with those big muscles and Kirk would have been like...
Yeah, and he would start that stuff in, like, you know, I mean, it's like, you know, everybody loved Star Trek, too, but that would have been the killer right there if they'd have...
Because they never met in the show, did they? They never actually physically encountered each other.
Yeah.
Because Ricardo couldn't actually be there. He was doing Fantasy Island, so...
Yeah, I know. I know Ricardo at the time, he had a bad back or something, so obviously they couldn't have him do anything.
I thought it was Fantasy Island. I thought that was why he couldn't be on there.
What's that?
I thought he was still on Fantasy Island at that time, and he couldn't get a...
Yeah, he was. But I'm talking about, you know, actually doing something physical.
Oh, he was there. He just couldn't do physical stuff with Kirk.
That's right. That's, you know, he basically, because his lower back was, you know, but the thing of it is, like I said, if he didn't have that problem, and they actually tried to bring William Shatner and Ricardo into a fight scene like on that moon there that was orbiting.
Oh, the Nebula?
Yeah, that would have been so...
Yeah, because I can't imagine, because even in the movie era, in Star Trek 3, when Kirk was fighting Krug, he was still kind of...
Yeah, he was still doing that stuff. I mean, I guess it was just, he was kind of like they were pushing and shoving.
And, that's kind of messed up because they didn't have him. But imagine what Krug could have done with him with one bat'leth.
Yeah.
One bat'leth. I mean, Kirk's always like, your hands are coming off.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Oh, I mean, it could have been messed up. I mean, so I think it was just, I really think Shatner was just impressed with his being in the scene. Like his head's here and you see the hands like a pose.
Yeah. I mean,
like a James Bond type, I'm going to do judo or
obviously an
action or whatever.
Because you look at him on TJ Hooker, he's an action actor,
yeah.
And that's what he likes to do. I mean, that's why everybody, all the other co-stars will say.
Didn't he do that on Nimbus 3 too?
What's that?
In Nimbus 3 and Star Trek 5, didn't he do that stuff too?
Oh yeah, the Bionic Kirk. How he took that, that Cation and threw her like 50 yards into a water.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's like, even my mother laughed at that. She says, "Oh my God!" And she goes, "I can't believe it."
Yeah, I mean, I looked at that the other day on YouTube, and I thought, "Oh, Shadow, you're just tripping." Oh my God! No. And I mean, he's like,
they should have man thing. I mean, because Harv Bennett was in that too, and they should have just had that.
You're right. That little. Like, okay, so Kirk is like an android. He's an android hand, and then in that fight scene, it was outside with that guy on the horse. All of a sudden, he's.
Yeah.
I mean, he can't get into that, and of course, Shatner directed it, so there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
And now
he loved that. I mean, because he was directing it, so he got to do all kinds of stuff in that. That he liked to do that he always wanted to do in Star Trek. Climbing mountains and falling off mountains and
throwing aliens 50 feet in the back of the room.
Zipping up and down the turbo lifts and, and
like, on Deck 78.
Yeah, Deck 78 and all this stuff.
Okay, to end this thing, we were talking about circuits.
Yeah, and now
I wanted to kind of touch on that deck issue. I mean, it's not enough to do a whole thing on, but I just wanted to touch on the deck issue in Star Trek 5. That was, I assume, just a dramatic effect, right?
It was his attempt at humor, putting that in there. He was trying to be funny with it, like he was trying to give you the idea that they were zipping all around the ship, going everywhere, with that rocket boots and stuff.
And I speculated that perhaps in the terms of Star Trek canon, right, there's this possibility that maybe the people who have been working on this ship, a few enlisted people had a little fun and decided to place these weird deck names up there. That's the only way I could explain it.
Yeah.
Unless that Enterprise A had this enormous neck about 1 billion meters high, and the primary hull was this huge thing. I mean,
well, remember what Scotty said at the beginning is I think this whole ship was put together by monkeys. So maybe...
maybe they imported monkeys from the French Cameroons where the chimps are, and they just had them working on the ship.
Yeah.
And they just randomly place signs in different places. Although, but they just placed them in where they were going to go, and that's what happened. It was like
we got a Deck 78 placard. Where should we put it? I'll just put it over there.
Well, maybe they got some augments, like these chimp augments, who were kind of advanced but didn't really know human math well, so they just slapped things up. I don't know. I mean, you could explain it in all kinds of funny ways, but that deck, I mean, and I did notice that at first. I thought, and I'm very forgiving on Star Trek 5. I find the plot actually kind of interesting in a metaphysical kind of way. And I mean, Kirk does ask a sensible question to that life form. What does God need with a starship? I mean, that's a sensible question. But you've just gone from going up to Deck 78 to that.
Yeah.
So it did kind of spoil the fantasy in some ways.
That story could have been handled so much different, and it could have sold.
And that was a story for the first movie, actually, if I recall. That was what they were going to do for the first movie.
I mean, it was a serious topic, but he
and an interesting one.
Comedy, sort of lighthearted comedy.
It's the weird stuff.
And that was the wrong way to look at that. That's why the movie didn't work, because it wasn't taken seriously. When you're talking about religion or something like that, you can't really, make it
right. When you're doing social stories.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I have expected to hear that deer thing come back. Remember that from Tomorrow Is Yesterday?
Yeah.
Oh, quite a deer, because when he was on the turbo lift, the computer was hiccuping. Remember?
Yeah.
It's like, wow, wow, wow. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking, say, oh, enter the bridge, dear. It's like, it's starting all this weird stuff, and then the captain's log recorder all, like, about to blow up. So he really hammed up the whole notion of the ship not working.
Yeah.
And you saw Scotty kind of working on stuff, but the captain's log thing is about to blow up, and you have this wow in Deck 78. It's like the ship is. There was an episode of the animated series where the ship started making practical jokes and spitting fruit at people and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It was almost like that, like the ship was just being weird.
Yeah.
Unless maybe what happened is that, was that a Jeffries tube they were up in, or a turbo shaft? It was a turbo shaft, right?
Yeah. Well, they were walking through, I think, a Jeffries tube corridor. Like, remember when Kirk, Spock, and McCoy had broke out of their cell in Star Trek V, and they were going the back way to the bridge, I guess, and it connected to a turbo shaft.
Well, and also that was a pretty bad brig too. Now that I think about it, I mean, because it's supposed to be inescapable, but Scotty blows through.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't blow through something like that without hurting the people in there. I mean, it's like they stood right in front of it when the friggin' wall panel was flying at them, and it's like, this is crazy.
unless it was the same material that Ilea robot broke through.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the same material of that little TV screen that Spock, or that little thing that Spock.
Yeah, I mean, if it was that flimsy, I mean, they could have just easily used their fists and just pounded a hole through the wall.
And Spock is like, this new bridge is escape proof, and they tested it on him, and yet Scotty's like, boom, rolls through it easy. And it's like, some escape proof brig. What did you do? Just lock a laser on it and boom.
I guess it was his way of thinking outside the box.
No, this really reminded me of a story that happened right around the time that movie came out. I was out on a sailboat ride with a friend of mine, and I thought at first he was being funny, but evidently he just had a slip. There's a lot of fog, and we were trying to get back. Now, usually you have like searchlights, big searchlights. So this guy, who's an experienced tailor who taught sailing, he pulls out a pen light. He pulls out a freaking pen light if I went through the storm. And it's like, this is like a Star Trek V moment, where things happen that don't make any sense. I mean, because if Scotty had already, I know it's like the back of my hand, he bumps his head, yet he can make his own escape-proof brig have a hole blow up in it. I mean, don't you know Jimmy, when you see one, what did you do?
Yeah.
Was there, maybe that was like a gold key moment where there's a chemical kit, and he poured something on it, and it just, I don't know. Because, I mean, maybe it had him, because in that comic where he's talking about the chemical kit, these ships were, these things were building, these robots were building these cities that they couldn't stop them. They were just building cities everywhere. Yeah. And Spock just dumped something on it. There's a chemical flaw in this metal. Maybe that's what happened with that thing. Oh, there's a chemical flaw. We'll just pour something on it and boom.
Yeah.
So that Enterprise A had a lot of problems, didn't it?
Yeah.
It stuttered. The brig was useless.
Yeah. I mean, that's why it looks so different, I guess, after when they went into Star Trek VI. They took all the
the easy escape-proof brig, the 78th deck out, or whatever that was. Yeah. Unless, on Trek Yards, I want to quote them again, they're always joking about the whales. Because I don't know if you've had Star Trek blueprints on the Enterprise D, there's a story that they have whales on the ship and dolphins to help with navigation.
Yeah, on the D, I see that they put them in there because they say the dolphins have a better sense of navigation. And
because Geordi told that Ferengi that we know there's dolphins on. He said, "Have you seen the dolphins yet?" So there's dolphins there. Maybe they're raising, maybe they're used for navigation.
They had dolphins on, Sequest. They had a dolphiner. They could have done it.
Darwin, yeah. So maybe you can speculate the Deck 78 or whatever. Maybe they have Rigelian rats that help with something, and they just keep them on those little tiny decks, and they're just not that big. Maybe there's rats up there. Maybe those little Lakuta ducks are up there.
Yeah.
Maybe they have Star Trek ducks, or maybe who knows? Maybe that's where they're raising avian Zindi.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe there's an animal sanctuary up there, and I don't know. Shatner didn't think about any of that. It's like we have these little mini decks with all these things on it, Or maybe even better. Maybe those decks are just filled with circuits. They did a circuit decks. Like there's a circuit in there. Maybe the circuit is in there, or translators, or whatever they use.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to mention that that Star Trek V thing because I have no way to explain that, actually. In serious, I can't explain that, except Shatner just wanted to make a comic moment.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he wanted to carry over some of the humor from Star Trek 4 because it seemed to work so well.
But that made sense, though, to me, at least. I mean,
so I guess he wanted to have some humor in the next movie, but he picked the wrong topic.
Right. Well, there was kind of a serious thing about Earth's destruction and saving whales in Star Trek 4, but there was enough space in it for some lighthearted banter, you know.
Yeah.
That they opened enough space.
I mean,
but
because they go back into the 1980s, they're like trying to fish up.
And they could use colorful metaphors, and they could have, you know, and they could throw shade at Jacqueline Suzanne and all that kind of business. Which I found interesting. Spock really, the giants.
Yeah.
Almost like, okay, so we're describing 80s pulp novelists as being, you know, almost like Kirk's like, oh, this is not a high point in humanity. Because, you know, of course, I get the guy's name, the punk that Spock neck pinched.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, my friend Henrique and I joke about that, how what he did is he wrote that song and performed it and inserted every punk cliche into, like, a minute.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Spock and them are sitting next to them hearing this thing about, how many megatons, you know, they just, like, put him up, you know, and they do it, everybody's clapping, but it's like they were just kind of taking cliches of the period and the tripey aspects and putting it with this Catherine Hicks, this Dr. Taylor, who's, well, not an Edith Keeler by any means, but she's sort of a more evolved kind of person where she's interested in the whales not being extinct and caring for them. And she ended up going with them because she's like, I'm not really that into this culture too much, and I don't feel at home there anymore. So,
yeah.
And plus, like, I lost my job or whatever. The whales left, and I have no use for anything. So I don't go with you, whatever you are on this cloaked ship, you know. Yeah. But Star Trek 4 had room for humor and kind of semi-romantic stuff happening, but with Star Trek 5, we're dealing with the ship being captured and manipulated, and this religious discussion, and things like Bones dealing with his father dying. Kind of heavy stuff.
Yeah. So
Kirk just inserts random comedy into it that really doesn't mesh with the movie, I guess.
Yeah, it just clashed, I think, through the whole movie.
I mean, Star Trek 6 had this whodunit and this kind of murder mystery happening, but they inserted humor in the right places.
They had, like, David Finch direct Star Trek 5 with the same, you know, realism and gothic kind of look like they did with Alien 3. You know,
in Star Trek 6.
Yeah, it would have looked better. It would have been serious. It would have dealt with a serious topic. You know, the characters wouldn't have been, you know, semi-funny. You know, I don't even agree that Sean Connery should have been the first choice for Cybok in that movie. I really don't think because.
Well, yeah, Sean Connery was in Indiana Jones though that year, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's why he couldn't do Star Trek 5.
He was in Last Crusade.
Yeah, he's not that kind of actor. The guy they ended up with.
He was James Bond. I don't see him as Cybok.
Yeah, he wasn't really that convincing for a Cybok. They needed somebody else to play that character. You know.
You think Lawrence Luckinbill was a little too hammy?
I think he played him in the way I think he figured Sean Connery would have played him.
You know, he reminded me in his tradition of Cybok. He reminded me of a cult leader.
Yeah.
Who was just into easy expletives and just like a person who spends $100 on a self-help book that says you can be yourself on 7 levels and that's the answer to everything, that kind of stuff. Yeah, just like a really low budget kind of Dr. Philish character, only like a little Jim Jones in there too, kind of this guy who manipulates people and could kill them, but it's kind of vain. But he said he was vain. But like I said, a story like that, you got Spock with a half-brother we never knew anything about.
Yeah.
Came kind of out of the blue.
I think it would have been better if he was played in a more depressing kind of way, because here you got a guy that goes around and he helps people dealing with their tragedies, and then of course he knows all these tragedies and he's experiencing all these tragedies.
In the movie, he seems like a hood. He seems like a charlatan. Yeah,
and if he always deals with the dark side of people, this is a guy that really isn't going to be like laughing or that happy. He's going to be sort of depressed and serious in a way, and he's going to be very, very resolute in finding his goal.
And instead, what they do is they end up with Zybok being like that character in Looney Tunes who goes up to Daffy Duck and says, "I'll sell you a container of Atom Call absolutely free for $5."
Yeah.
That's what Zybok ends up being, like a straight-up con.
Yeah.
Almost like a Vulcan hearing mud in a weird kind of way, except he's not selling anything per se. He's just kind of self-deceiving.
Yeah.
And like a cult leader, but he doesn't have that dour thing where he's like, "Oh, my children, I will save you." It's me, Zybok. He's a little too jolly.
Yeah.
But like I said, with Star Trek V, I give it allowances for some crazy reason. I don't know why. I think the idea is sound. Maybe it could have been done a little bit better, but it's not unwatchable.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why. I'm just saying this to be honest. Whenever I see First Contact and I see that scene with the Borg, I have to pause it a little bit. I don't know why. Maybe because with Picard, I have more emotional investment.
Yeah.
So I don't think of Picard and think of, "Ah!" I don't think of that. I just no. That's why I always call it Star Trek First Blood, because it just...
First Blood.
It was like you had this Rambo moment in the holodeck, and you said it was based on an older script that they had from TNG, and they just brought it up again.
I think they just tabled because of other stories, and they wanted to have Picard deal with the Borg again.
And I think we've covered this before, but I just want to bring it up again in Star Trek Gaps. Let's go back to Shatner. You were talking about it earlier today. When I first watched Plato's Stepchildren, there are these people who are telekinetic, and they can make people do whatever they want to. But what do we have? We Tweedledee, Tweedledum, and then Spock doing the tap dance. You have Kirk. Yeah. So it's like, okay, I'm supposed to be upset by this, and I'm seeing Bones like, "This is so terrible. You're demeaning these people." It's like, Shatner's doing a good job demeaning himself.
Yeah.
I was like, you didn't have to ham it up that much.
We were laughing. I mean, it's like, this is supposed to be a serious moment here, and yet the only things they could think of to make it, torturous is these childish little things that, you would see kids doing on a playground.
Right, and then Spock trying to tap dance around Kirk.
And so the audience is going to laugh. And that's why it didn't work, because they should have thought of something more, more...
I mean, it wasn't like you had Spock with... Remember that guy in The Last Outpost, that portal, who had that sword and he was doing all this really fast stuff?
Yeah.
If they had Spock doing that with a sword and trying to kill Kirk, that would have been interesting.
Yeah.
But not... not... And also, if they did that, they could have had Kirk, like, "Please kill me," or something, and just be... But not acting like a fool up there.
Yeah.
It was just an excuse for Shatner to be ridiculous. They didn't play up the dramatic tension in that. And they had this character, this Alexander, who hated the situation, and you had to kind of play it through Bones and his point of view.
Yeah.
Because they're like, they're thinking this is so terrible, and it's like, oh my god, they're thinking this is terrible, but I'm seeing, I'm like, why am I laughing? It's like, this is supposed to be terrible, and they're saying that, "Oh, you can't do this to them." And it's like, what are you doing to them? They're just making Kirk like a fool. And it's more humiliation than anything.
When I was watching that episode, my father was on the couch next to me there when he was watching it. When he started that in, my father goes, "I'm getting the hell out of here."
You went, he's doing that.
I don't see how the hell you could sit there and watch that. I was like,
Well, I mean, he knew the Kirk would do that every week, right?
Yeah. Well, he wouldn't watch it every day. We just watched some episodes at a time. He was waiting for the news to come on after the...
Right. I mean, could you imagine the original series if it had been like, "All right, we've accomplished this mission, Spock. Pony time! Yay!" That wouldn't be a bad ending if they'd done that. So, I mean, that was season 3, and season 3 of TNG, TOS, we discussed that. That could be a weird area.
Yeah.
I mean,
like they were trying to feel their way out, into a...
Now, they did have that interracial kiss and everything, but, at least Kirk wasn't brain doing that, so that was nice.
People are getting smarter about that, because for years people say that was the first interracial...
Oh, the Sammy Davis thing, are you talking about that?
Yeah, I mean, when Kirk and Uhura was, they were forced to kiss. And people today say, well, you can't really say that was the first interracial kiss because they were forced to do it. But
they don't count the Sammy Davis kiss because that was like a very gentle peck in Sammy Davis's show before that, if you're referring to that Sammy Davis kiss before that.
Yeah.
But with the Star Trek kiss, they lingered on it, but it was not a literal kiss. It was a forced kiss.
Yeah.
But again, basically, they're forcing people to kiss each other.
Yeah.
Apparently, laughing kills Vulcans if Bones is right.
Yeah.
I don't quite know how that would work, but I mean,
I could sympathize with Spock when he was trying to deal with his anger and he went and crushed that vase. I'm thinking, I feel for you because that's the way he just put you through it. And
I mean, an interesting reaction would have been for him to crush that and then say, "This isn't logical. This shouldn't have happened. Did my pump fire change the chemistry of this?" Like it's just
somebody wake up and let's start this episode over. It's like
I'm in an alternate timeline where I had cardboard thing. Unless you know what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if Spock's monitor wasn't some futuristic version of the Nintendo Labo. Because when I go into stores and see that, I said, "It's cardboard. It's freaking cardboard." Everything is like a Labo Star Trek thing. Like maybe Nintendo doesn't, because of the future. They make like low quality.
Yeah, my mother called on and she really pointed something out that I didn't see. Remember the episode, the Tholian web, when they were trapped inside of that space and the crew was starting.
The interface space.
Well, remember when McCoy was in sick bay and he was working on something and one of the lab technicians attacked him, and when he picked up McCoy and he threw him on the table, what ends up all over the floor? Plastic bottles. And my mother goes, "Well, it's a good thing everything was in plastic bottles."
That little ketchup bottle thingies he had.
Yeah, nothing shattered because everything was in plastic bottles. And my mother goes, "Well, it's a good thing they had everything in plastic bottles."
Well, it's funny on Next Generation, Crusher had all these neat medical techie things and little beams and stuff, but on the original series, you had this big Bones with a little eyedropper.
Yeah.
And he had a hypo. It was like a needle. It looked like a big needle.
Yeah.
It was an actual hypo spray, but with Crusher, it was like a little thing you put something in at the bottom. Now, in TOS, didn't you have to set those as things?
Yeah, on the back where you press on the neck, there's like 2 buttons there on the back. I have one of those.
You have a prop hypo spray?
Yeah, I have a prop on it. They actually took like a little glass bottle and they screw it in on the bottom, and you can put fluid in there if you want that's colored.
Oh, you mean like the TNG ones?
Yeah, and so the end of it is just a gold tip, and it uses high pressure to get in through the skin instead of the way McCoy did it with his hand. This thing does it itself. So you push the button on the back of it, and that automatically throws the air into the.
Yeah, I always think the TNG hypo spray is better because they seem more logical. You put that thing on the bottom, and you just
Yeah.
But like I said, and also Crusher, it seems like all her medicines, they go into hypo sprays.
Yeah.
And she doesn't. Bones didn't he spray things like spray bottles he used?
Yeah, it was like something like that. I remember.
And plastic bottles, like you said, falling down and everything.
Yeah, I remember Picard used the hypo spray there when he was trying to get the Worf that de-evolved into an old Klingon or something like that.
Like the big monster demon Klingon thing.
He took some of Deanna's pheromones and somebody was spraying it.
Right, the frog Deanna. Yeah.
Yeah. So they could use the hypo spray for different things.
Yeah, it had that kind of flavor where you could use, but with TOS, I never noticed it until you just mentioned the plastic bottles.
Yeah.
But like I said, he had those.
Yeah.
But do you remember in the 90s? I don't know if you ever saw him at conventions. Remember those little, I guess, pins that Worf wore on his sash?
Yeah. Those.
Somebody, I don't know who did it. I saw him at the 91 convention. They had these little silvery things, little glowing LCD stars, and what they were is there was that little thing that Worf wore.
Yeah, I think I saw that too.
And they wore them as pins.
Yeah.
And it was just a thing they did. So there were all these prop things. There were also people who would be hobbyists. Remember the agonizer in the mirror?
They'd stick on yours.
That was always the cheapest prop. The chops would be like $100. The agonizer would be $20. So what they do, they buy a bunch of agonizers, like they're $60. They buy several of them. And what they do is they would put transistor radio speakers in them and use them as a speaker.
Yeah.
So there were all these Star Trek prop things.
There's a guy that I knew that was in that Star Trek club that we used to be in there, the
Casimir, yeah.
And he made a whole bunch of phaser ones.
You mean TOS phaser ones?
Yeah, he made them all himself, and they look they looked like they were made out of a, you know, like a toy store or something. They were really nice. They did.
Were they like resin models?
I think it was wood. Some of it, the parts were wood. He actually got the little gauges that were on the top, you know, that has the numbers and stuff, and he had the.
Well, yeah. I told you I made my Phaser 1 out of.
We made everyone in the club one of those Phaser 1s, and I was like, wow, these things are nice. I mean, you know, of course you can't sell them because it's, you know, property that belongs to him, but he was just giving them away to people and stuff, and they were really nice, you know.
But I remember. I don't know if you ever had it. Did you ever have the Playmate Enterprise D Frisbee?
The Frisbee? No, I never had that.
Well, it's not a Frisbee's a trade name. It was a Frisbee. I can't think of another name for what that is. So it was a Frisbee. But here's the problem I had with it. The nacelle part and the primary hole is like a paper airplane.
Yeah.
The saucer was solid plastic.
Huh.
And you held it on the bottom with a little, like a fin, and you threw it. But I thought, wait a minute. If the bag is like a paper airplane, how could this thing fly with this big, heavy plastic upsection?
Yeah, exactly.
And it didn't. It would always go
nosedive.
Yeah, and I still have that. It's like this was what was that planet in Generations where the Enterprise D crashed?
Did they have a name for it? I don't know.
Yeah,
was it Viridian 3? Yeah.
Viridian 3. It was like Viridian 3 every time, like boom, I want to crash the ship.
Yeah.
It was blowing up the Enterprise every time I used that because, and then on the front, of course, on toy they showed flying loop-de-loops through the air. I could never get it. I mean, if you have a Frisbee, why do you want a solid plastic front with a heavy, a light back?
Yeah, I don't know. I like I said, I never bought things that you could play outside with. You know, I like kites and stuff. Never.
Like I said, with that, I wasn't even planning on using it. I just said, I want to see what this is like. It was cheap. It was maybe that's what it was. It was like $13. And on the cover, the saucer was cardboard.
This is one thing that I did buy that was used outdoors. It was an inflatable Enterprise D that you can take out on the water and sit on it.
Oh, you get one of them?
Yeah, it's pretty big. It looks as big as a friggin' air mattress. It's huge, you know. But you know, I weigh like 300 pounds, and when I went and jumped on that, it went right down.
Yeah,
you know, and I'm like, well, this is nice, but in theory, but it's not going to work for an adult in my size. You know,
like did you ever see the Galoob dioramas they were planning on having?
Oh, yeah, I saw pictures of it.
Yeah, it was weird. That big like metal console they had.
Yeah.
They put Geordi there. That was like navigation. For some reason, they clipped the navigation things. It was like a little tiny bridge. Yeah. And it was a weird thing. And it had like, they never manufactured. That was one of those Galoob things they never made. I'm going to tell a story here to see if anybody remembers this. I know I've told you this, but I ordered one thing from Intergalactic Trading Company when I was about 7 years old. And it was a Star Trek 20th anniversary poster. It had a picture of the Enterprise Connie crew with Kirk and all them, and it had the ship below it. You know, cool poster for a kids group. So I get a poster, and what it is, it's a black and white etching of some young woman flipping a pancake. And on the back of it says,
"My water."
What?
oh man!
I mean, we walk over like, oh, you know, not what I wanted. And then on the back it says, the little girl who really knew how to cook.
Yeah.
And I thought, did they make a big misprint? And I never. It was a sci-fi general magazine. They had 2010. They had Aliens. I think was Aliens the second movie?
Yeah.
Wasn't that 86-ish, 7-ish?
Yeah, right around. I think 86.
So they had Alien stuff in there. They had I think Buckaroo Banzai by then. They had some Indiana Jones stuff. They had Star Wars stuff because Star Wars was, you know, not old, new, but fairly. They had Dune.
Yeah.
They still had some old Battlestar Galactica stuff they were trying to get rid of.
Yeah. And
they had some stuff from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the first movie or whatever they did. And then they had this poster. I think it might have been advertised there, but I got sent it. I don't know what happened to it. It was pointless. It was like somebody just made some random thing and sent it in there and said, well, place out your starter post with this random flipping pancake character.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, I don't know if you've ever gone to the Bull Moose website. We talked about going to that store today. Yeah. If they don't have an album cover available, if you're looking for music, they insert this little blue etching of Paul Simon's face there.
Yeah.
just to do it. I don't know what the point is. It's etching of Paul Simon. But it might be that poster. It's like, this has nothing to do with Star Trek or any sci-fi. This is some random picture. Maybe it's an art installation. I don't know, but I don't get it. And you know what it might have been? You know how some sci-fi fans are? They take something you barely see in the background and make it a big deal.
Yeah.
That might have been in some sci-fi thing, like a background thing, and they just like bought it out as a big deal.
Is that company still around, by the way,
Intergalactic Trading Company?
Yeah. I haven't... I was getting catalogs from them, and all of a sudden it just stopped.
Yeah, I think they blew with the FASA, not the FASA, but the Galoob stuff, because they advertised all that Galoob stuff that didn't come out.
Yeah.
Because we ordered it all. We ordered that. Remember that big bridge that was supposed to make that? Ooh, that goes right back to Subject A. I remember they said if you open up if you take the Star Trek TNG Galoob bridge, you can flip the consoles over to reveal circuits.
Ooh.
Well, I remember they mentioned circuits in that. It's like, swing out consoles that reveal circuits. So evidently they were carrying circuits over to the toys.
That must have been an idea from the first season, and they were
maybe the thing is that Gene Roddenberry came in and said, "Well, I'm in charge. I'll write the byline for this toy."
Yeah.
So you open it to reveal circuits.
Yeah.
You turn over to reveal the detector circuit. You know.
They were right in that Netflix episode there about toys, and they were talking about Star Trek. The toys for Star Trek never really that great over the years.
Yeah, well, the Playmates did the better of them. They still had some issues, but, I have to say, of course, there's the helmet.
Yeah, I mean...
The helmet. Do you remember a place called Hobbies Plus up on Broadway?
Yeah, okay, I remember that, yeah.
For a time, they sold these green Star Trek price guides. They had 3 of them. I had all 3.
Yeah.
And they had everything. They used to make... What they do is they call it label slapping in that show. They take like a game mat that could have been Mickey Mouse, could have been Ronald McDonald, and they'd insert Spock into it.
Yeah.
And
a quick way to do something, yeah.
And basically, they even made a model of Spock shooting a serpent.
Yeah.
And it was Spock, but it was shooting a serpent, which was never in Star Trek. And they had that, was it Mission to Gamma 6?
Yeah.
It was a playset that had this fake Vol.
Yeah, they showed a picture of it. It was like, it almost looked like a Castle Grayskull thing,
Yeah. It could be Vol, but...
Yeah,
And they had this can that came out, you put your hand into this little hand monster.
Yeah.
And little tiny people that orbited around. It was like something that never really happened.
They said they deliberately made that episode there, the Apple, as the like the episode that they were going to base a toy line on.
Right, but then they did other stuff to it.
Yeah. And
like Vol didn't have a hand thing.
Yeah, it didn't come out right. Whatever the idea was, it didn't work. I don't know.
And that's very valuable now, isn't it? That's kind of a grail.
Well, anything made back in those days is going to be worth something, even if it was goofy. I mean, it's a collector's item now. I mean, they're not going to play with it. It's just, but it's like I said, it took a long, long time, for any toy company to seriously sit down and say, well, let's do these toys,
Right. Playmates did. Art Asylum did even better, so...
Yeah.
But I don't... Art Asylum, were they toys, or were they toys made for more specific collector market, to you?
I think they were targeting older people.
Yeah, like Eagle Moss is now. They're not really toys. They're more...
A lot of figures today come with stands because collectors would like to put them on something and just display it and not actually play with it. They just put it on a shelf and leave it, or they'll just leave it in the box. A lot of people just do that. They just leave it.
Right, because maybe they're trying to sell it or they want to keep it valuable or whatever.
Yeah.
But the thing is that the only other Playmates Enterprise I had a issue with was on that strut. They had these big bumpy things where you made noises, but that wasn't really that big a deal. I didn't mind that too much.
Yeah,
there really isn't a lot there. It's not like the phaser, the cricket phaser, which they again made too big and they put all these weird colors onto it.
Yeah, I mean, I actually like the Playmates Enterprise D. I mean, it really...
it's definitely a little knob that's very good.
Yeah, it wasn't really too far off the mark,
Except the saucer wasn't detachable, but I guess it was unavoidable with that, so...
Yeah.
Except they started doing all these weird things, like they had a Generations one that blew all these pieces off.
Yeah. Yeah, when you press a button, that lid would fly off.
Do you remember the gold-plated one they had? It was like a gold one for no reason.
It was supposed to be a collector's edition or something.
Yeah, and that's not apparently that worth that much, actually. Because I remember that being very mass-produced.
Yeah, they did.
I don't think...
Yeah. It's where Star Wars toys are now. They've been making tons of it, and it isn't selling. It's just sitting on the shelves.
Maybe they should have made a silver model of that refit Connie that Picard had with the nacelles on backwards. How many episodes is that in again? It was like 6.
What do you? I mean, we talking about when they
the TNG? We had that refit Connie model that Rod. I think it was Rod who built that. Was it Rod Roddenberry who built that?
Yeah, Roddenberry's son made that, but he put the nacelles on backwards. He didn't know. I guess as this was his first model, I suppose, and they painted the whole thing with silver paint, and I guess to hide all the mistakes he made.
All right.
So.
Well, this topic about circuits get into a short circuit with all these things that happen in Star Trek, but that's how these things happen. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. You start one area and it spins off into another.
Well, at least we covered the topic of circuits. We're just.
Well, we covered that. I mean, it is a vast topic. It turns out there's this article on it, and like I said, I guess after Deep Space Nine, they showed some circuits, and even like Intergalactic Trading Company. I'll have to look that up because. Do you remember that Lincoln Enterprises too? Before I get out of here, had some really high-end Star Trek stuff like pewter stuff.
Yeah, I have 2 pieces from that. It went to a game, FASA game. They were game pieces, and they come with little stands, and they were all made out of pewter, but you had to paint them if you wanted to paint them. They were.
Did Lincoln Enterprise make those FASA ships too?
Yes, they did.
Very
because they bent easy. You had to be very careful when you played with them not to put any weight on them because they would bend really easy with the bed.
Yeah, I remember these advertisements in Starlog, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were nice. If you were like yourself, you're making that discovery, and they're really detailed like that, and they're.
I had some of those. I had some of those FASA models. I had the refit Connie. Yeah. I had the original Connie. Somewhere I still have the top of the Oberth. Well, it was Grissom then.
I have a Gorn ship.
I have the MA-12.
Yep.
That's when I have. They had a BH-2, but I didn't get that. I never got the what did my mother call it? The Orion Wanderer. She calls it Orion.
I got regular 1 space station.
I had that, but I messed that up because those little things that came out of the bottom were flimsy, and I broke them.
Yeah. If you keep it out, it snaps off. And then I had one Romulan Bright One, I think was what they call it, the Bright One fighter.
Was it the one with the 1 wing?
No, it had 2 wings. It was like a bird of prey kind of design.
Yep, those Romulan ships were nice. They were like birds. They looked like literal birds.
Yeah, if you painted them up, they really look nice.
Yeah, I never got the Excelsior with that because wait a minute, did I? Oh, you know what? I did, but I got it when they made them all in one piece.
Yeah,
but they had the display stand affixed to it. Yeah. Somehow it still fell apart. But I remember the Excelsior, the one you put together, was really, really, really hard to get. It was expensive. It was the most expensive one. Yeah. But I wanted the Lochner and the Chanley and all those ships. And didn't they basically have all the ships that were in the role playing game basically at some point? Most of them anyway.
I think they did all of them. Yeah.
Didn't they have a Northampton?
What's that?
Northampton. Didn't they have one of them?
Did they? I don't know. I didn't have all of the pieces, but I remember there was a catalog, and you could order them through them.
Well, I don't remember. They actually made plastic ones too for FASA, and they made the Scouts.
Yeah.
And they make all these. They had glow in the dark ones. They had gray ones. They had white ones.
Yeah.
Somewhere downstairs, I have parts for tons of the Connie dreadnoughts.
Yeah.
But were those Connies? Was that a whole other thing? Those dreadnoughts.
Well, they had a TOS dreadnought, and
right, they look like Connies with 3 nacelles and 2.
Yeah, it was like it's like they took the saucer was like 2 bottoms and they put them together, like
right. Yeah, that's what I've always thought that was like a Kit Bash Connie look.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was neat looking, but I didn't like the way the saucer was on it, and I didn't like the idea of all these little navigational deflectors all over the front. They had like 3 in the front, and then they had the shuttle bay in the front. I didn't.
Oh yeah, the 2 shuttle bays, one in front, one in back, I think.
And then they had
there was no shuttle. There was no shuttle bay in back. It was a deflector in back.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't get that. But yeah, I mean, it was an interesting look. But I think they later, when they did the TOS refit look of a dreadnought, it looked better that way than when they did it. So,
they did a refit dreadnought too.
Yeah, it's in the FASA books. It's like they took the motion picture era, and it kind of.
Well, dreadnoughts in that time, they're kind of kit bashes. Basically, a lot of those older ships were kit bashes.
Yeah.
Like the little scout or whatever with one nacelle, that was kind of a kit bashy looking thing. With the next generation, the All Good Things dreadnought they had, they actually added stuff to that. They had that. What was that on the bottom? That weapon.
The saucer was looked like a polaron beam emitter.
I used to joke at the end of Voyage that was, since that was later on, maybe that was the EMH's photonic cannon.
Yeah.
Like they built a photonic cannon because there was this big boom that came out of it, and they had like these little phaser emitters near the bridge on that.
Yeah, I didn't like that, putting those up there on the top. I mean, it was like, it just looked too, I don't know.
Well, mean to the Enterprise D, maybe.
It seemed like they were just slapping parts on the Enterprise D. Nothing looked like it actually belonged there. It just, I mean, you could look at it and say, yeah, it looks neat and stuff like that, but still, it didn't look like it was meant to stay there. It was like it was parts you could just pull off when you didn't want to use it that way or something.
Well, it was a Q created timeline, so I'm sure he just had a little fun doing all that stuff.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, yeah.
But, I mean, like I said, that wasn't really discontinuity. That was just a very strange design. I mean, like I said, they kind of did it with NX-01. Remember they had this NX-01 from this alternate future that had all this stuff on it?
Oh, yeah, when they, I remember that one, yeah.
In the Zindi. And it looked like they had little, like, boxes all over it.
Yeah, I think those were, like, weapons ports or something like that. They had all over it.
I mean, when Voyager returned home, they had all these, it was like a shell or something. It was like this a blade of shielding they had to use.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, Voyager always had a lot of stuff attached to it. Like, they had those Borg things attached to it. They had a blade of things attached to it.
Yeah.
I'm surprised Voyager didn't come back looking like NX-01 from that with all these stunt things on it.
Yeah.
Because they had all these Borgy things they put on it. And wasn't there some actual Borg systems that Janeway just left on the ship?
Yeah, because somebody had said that the system worked better with the Borg.
Chakotay.
Yeah.
I wonder what happened when they got back to Earth. They had to remove all those Borg circuits. I mean, now, I'm thankful when the Borg came along that the Borg were not into circuits. And they could have been because the Borg really had circuits all over them.
Yeah. Well, I mean the cube itself looked like it was made out of circuits. I mean, it was like...
Well, it was, wasn't it? Wasn't that like one of those Image G things where they just put old model parts together?
Yeah, I mean, they just, all they needed to do was build a square frame, and from that they can put, connecting frames and stuff, and they just need a light bulb on the inside to glow it, so when they turn it on, it looks, psychedelic. But, basically they just were tacking anything they could find to put on it, like battleship parts and stuff like that, like they do with the Star Wars.
Right. Basically, I think somebody called the Borg ships cosmic tumbleweeds.
Yeah. Because,
when you assimilate stuff, you just tack stuff onto the ship or just whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I mean, again, I don't know how they were conceiving the Borg. I mean, later on it was all very linear. I don't know if the Borg just went down there and tore up things, just attached them to the ship. I don't know how they were supposed to do it, but...
Yeah.
But the Borg again evolved, but they never really bought circuits into Borg. That was just what they were.
Yeah.
I mean, they looked circuity anyway because they were.
Yeah, they had lots of wires and cords and stuff like that.
I mean, if you looked at the Borg in First Contact and later, they had a more cleaner design. As that video I mentioned by Steve Shives pointed out, he mentioned that they had Borgs tapping control panels by then.
Yeah, they streamlined the costumes.
Right, rather than have like. I got a wire hanging out of my head. I get all these bumpy circuits all over me.
Yeah, it looked better that way. But they never really explained why the Borg in that Q Who episode where they took parts off the dead Borg, why they did that, Remember they took something off the eye and they took a piece off the arm and then they vanished. And it's like, well, why did they do that? And they never really explained that,
Oh, you mean when the Borg are injured, they'll take a piece off and they'll beam away?
Yeah. So they never really went back and explained why they did that or something, and they never did it again.
Yeah, I noticed that. They never did take the piece off again and just go.
Yeah.
I mean, even though Hugh wasn't dead, they did this thing where they put something into his head or something, but they didn't remove pieces from Hugh and.
Yeah. It was something I don't know. They never really talked about.
Unless it was like we're salvaging machinery.
Yeah, but if they can make it from Borg nanites, they don't really need it, unless they can, just suddenly create something. You know.
I don't know. In those days, the Borg didn't assimilate people, though, did they? They were just interested in technology.
Well, that's what they said. I mean, technology, but yeah, the assimilation thing didn't come till later. I think it was when they took Picard and they did that to him.
And it was weird because in Q-Who, if you remember, it was implied the Borg were actually biological beings who were implanted with implants earlier on.
Yeah.
Which went against assimilation.
Yeah.
So I guess the conceptualization of the Borg was kind of different too in the beginning, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It did change, you know, because I don't think they had this sort of. Remember, they had the babies that had.
I was just going to mention that, like they had a baby fitted with all these biological things, and that's not how the Borg usually function.
So if they assimilate, why would they want to have babies? I mean, it's just it doesn't.
Unless that was a Borg maturation chamber.
Yeah, I don't know. It was like, you know, they never explained why you never see that again in any of the Borg encounters and stuff.
And then, of course, like I said, in Voyager, it implied the Borg. Well, in Voyager, they had this thing, the mobile emitter guy hooked up with this Borg stuff, and it created this little infant Borg.
Yeah.
That was very close to what they did in TNG with this Borg infant, which is not how the Borg usually work. They usually just assimilate whoever they want.
Yeah. That's most of their, that's where they get all their people from, is assimilated worlds and ships and whatever they...
But I guess, was it Gene's idea to write the Borg, or whose was that idea?
What was that?
Whose idea was the Borg? Was that Gene's or somebody else's?
Oh, geez. I don't know. That's a good question, because I think it was by season 3. I don't think he was really doing anything. He was sick or something.
Well, that was season 2, wasn't it? The Q-Who?
Yeah.
Cool.
Q was Roddenberry's creation, obviously, but as far as the Borg goes, I don't really know whose idea that was.
Well, the Ferengi were Gene's, right?
I think so, yeah.
Because they were not much of the villains, so they couldn't really use them.
To have a different villain other than the Klingon, because you wanted to kind of drop that. And then, like I said, that was another thing that changed, because at first the Klingons were a conquered people by the Federation, and then all of a sudden they're not. You know, so because Q had mentioned,
right, because Q said no wonder they defeated you.
Yeah, that's the reason. Yeah. So apparently we were supposed to think in season 1 that there was a big battle between the humans and the Klingons lost that war and they became allied with the Federation, but that's not what happened. Because but yeah, I mean, it was, they wanted to have a different villain, but the villain they created was not very scary. No,
they created the villain that ended up being more annoying than scary, and
they ended up playing him funny instead, because they looked funny.
Because I remember getting you remember the season magazines they had for TNG?
Yeah.
They had the Ferengi, and they were like, oh, they're going to be the new villain.
Yeah.
And when you see them, they're throwing energy whips, maybe, but half the time they're acting everything like, hey, they're just not.
The only thing I liked was those whips they used that threw
out. Yeah, those were cool, but
they didn't keep that.
The Ferengi Manor just seemed like little sniveling silent movie villains.
And they wore like furs and stuff, and
yeah, they weren't threatening at all. They were more nuisances.
Yeah. Like
hairy mud type characters.
Yeah.
And speaking of a weird comic book, I mean, we could go on about comic book. Do you remember when DC had the Star Trek comic license?
Yep.
Do you remember the outrageous O'Connor?
Yeah, okay, yep.
Joe Piscopo's in it. O'Connor was William Campbell, who was going to play Riker initially. They auditioned him. And he's this kind of roguish character, and there's these two people who are getting married, and he's kind of caught in the middle of it, and Data's trying to understand humor. Well, we established from that O'Connor is a visitor to the ship, pretty much welcome there. The crew kind of get a kick out of him, but he's not a villain.
Yeah. DC
wrote a comic book where O'Connor captures the crew and tries to kill them. For no reason, just because he's a villain suddenly. Okay. They do 3 comics on this. Then it's like, we forget about that. And then DC, a month later, they do a thing where O'Connor is the regular O'Connor again.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, why did they make O'Connor a scary villain when he was never a villain in the first place, and then they bring him back and he's just O'Connor again? I mean, bring that character back if you want, but don't. It would be like bringing Harry Mudd back as a philanthropist.
Well, what was interesting about those comic books at the time is in the last couple of pages, you had reader comments.
Oh, yes. I believe they called them Hailing Frequencies Open.
Yeah. And
they have to give it a name.
The feedback that they would get from some of the fans wasn't always great.
Yeah, it's weird how they would get more comments on the comics than they would on the show. It's weird. They would open up the comics more.
Yeah, they'd go right after him about that, and they would laugh at him, or they'd say, "Oh, you need to change artists." Or
I remember that O'Connor one, they really went after him on that one. Like, O'Connor's a villain, I still remember that in there.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned, was it DC that had that Olympic Excelsior?
Yeah, it was DC that had it when they started their Mirror Universe saga.
Was it during the Star Trek 3 era when they just introduced the ship?
Yeah, it was like in between Star Trek 3 and 4, and
it was like an 87
to pick up Kirk and his company.
So it was like an 1985 era kind of comic.
What's that?
Was it like a 1985-ish kind of comic?
Yeah, somewhere like 85. It was just like maybe a year and a half before Star Trek 4 came out, and
so it was like real close to 3 more.
Yeah.
And the Excelsior, you said, was enormous in that.
Yeah, they made an Excelsior that you could park a bird of prey inside the shuttle bay, and even then there was still room left over. I mean, they showed it, Kirk and the others were talking, and you could see the nose of the bird of prey over their heads, like that thing was nothing bigger than a runabout. And I'm like, come on.
Think about it. If the proportion-wise, the Excelsior was obviously big, but if the Enterprise A could barely fit on a space dock in Star Trek 3,
yeah,
would the Excelsior have to put an ILEA probe and just blow the whole thing up? Or beam out of there? I mean, how would the Excelsior get out of there if it was that big?
Yeah.
So we knew in Star Trek 3 it couldn't be that big.
No.
Because of the way the doors were. Unless they had a door on the other side big enough to accommodate the Enterprise D, like a huge door.
Yeah.
But still, we know from Star Trek 6 the Excelsior is not that big. It's bigger than the Enterprise A, or whatever, but it's certainly not.
Well, in Star Trek 3, they didn't really have an idea of how big it was. I mean, no, it was a brand new thing, and I don't think even the people that created it really had an idea of what the scale would be next to the refit Enterprise. So that's why everybody was like, like what they're doing now with J.J. Abrams' Enterprise. Everybody's trying to guess how big this thing is, and nobody can get it right because outside the ship looks like it should be small, and on the inside it's a huge monster of a ship.
Well, like I said, if you take it out of the Prime universe and what's happening now, you see this fairly aircraft carrier-sized Enterprise being built on Earth, but in space it's as big as a mountain.
Yeah, I mean, you could put a whole colony in there. I mean, it's like, it's ridiculous.
Well, you think about it. Maybe in some other non-Prime universe, the Enterprise is dehydrated. Or something. And you put it into space. Remember those little dinosaurs used to get, and they were like foam rubber?
Yeah.
They're like a sponge, remember? And you put them in water, they become a big, fat, messed up sponge.
Yeah.
Smell bad.
Yeah.
Maybe that Enterprise like that. It's a little thing on Earth, but you put it into space and it balloons up.
Well, when they had the Enterprise in the water, I think that would have, remember when they parked?
Oh, the sinking one. Yeah, well, like I said, if we get out of the Prime universe, anything goes. It's a free-for-all. Because, like I said, it's like maybe Nike put a thing on the back of the Enterprise, like, oh, you just pump it and make it bigger,
Yeah.
Like the Pump It Starship or something. And proportions are weird now. But in TOS, the only time proportions ever get weird were in novels or comics because they were comics, and like I said, Gold Key, you had those rocket engines on the Enterprise.
They didn't understand that what it was. They thought they were just regular rockets.
And the weird thing is when you look at the back of them too, you see the little caps, those little round caps at the end of the warp nacelles.
Yeah.
And there's smoke coming out around it. It's like there's this engine in there, and there's a smoke coming out, and that's fireproof. Yeah. I mean, I'm surprised they didn't have like a laser beam coming out of the deflector. I mean, just the way that whole thing operated. And I'm surprised the torpedoes weren't like bullets or something. I mean, it was just crazy rules. I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, but like I said, Gold Key, if I recall, was made by a guy who had never seen Star Trek Beyond a few promotional pictures. Which is weird, because if you saw a promotional picture of the Enterprise, you never saw smoke coming out of it.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I think Matt Jeffries said that was the whole point of the Enterprise, the Connie, was that every ship before that was a flying saucer or a rocket.
Yeah.
And when they designed the Enterprise, they wanted a different ship, so they mixed a flying saucer-like hull, and they had rocket-like things, but they weren't real rockets.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been like, I mean, I don't know if it would like a comic where the Enterprise Connie saucer detaches and it has UFO little landing gear it comes down on it. I'm like I said, we speculated a lot on the captain's yacht too on the Enterprise D, what that is.
Yeah.
Because you said these other nacelles that folded out somehow.
Yeah, I'm thinking the only way they could have, because otherwise it just looked like a UFO. But if they had it detach from the saucer of the D, and all of a sudden it would just like you see like things unfolding under it, then it would take some sort of shape, then it would have looked better, I think.
Well, even though the Enterprise E's captain's yacht was placed in a very unfortunate area. I mean, at least it looked
underneath the torpedo launcher.
Right. At least it looked like it made sense being there in terms of shape.
Yeah, that was a smart place to put that. I wonder whose crazy idea that was. You park a car next to a cannon.
Like I said, I don't know if having on the Dreadnought, having that shuttle bay right near the deflector is a good idea. 3 deflectors is a good idea either.
Yeah, that I don't know.
Just turn on the deflectors when you're using the shuttle bay, But like I said, Gene Roddenberry had a lot of strange rules as it was for the nacelles had to be in line a certain way.
Yeah, it was only even numbers, so couldn't have odd number or something. I mean,
maybe Gene just had a confrontational relationship with future technology. Like, I have no problem making a circuit on the ship, but the nacelles have to be this way and that way.
What it is it had to feel right to him. When he saw something, it had to look functional. It had to look logical in a way. And if it didn't, then he would say, "Well, you got to change this."
Wouldn't that be like having the new Starfleet chief of engineers be Deanna Troi?
Yeah, I mean,
could you imagine how she'd make starships if she was in charge?
Yeah.
I mean, she's implied a million times that's not her thing. Yeah. She's not technical.
Yeah.
So maybe she might be into circuits and these perfectly aligned because she doesn't really know warp geometry. Yeah. But I think, like I said, maybe Roddenberry's idea was that I want to write human stories. I don't care how things work.
Yeah. But, when other people, there's a lot of people out there that like to, make up starships, and you see it on Trek yards, and it's just, they understand, I think, to a really good degree how these things have to look right, and they have to, it's more than just making it have the parts that it needs. It's also the aesthetic of how you blend that together.
Maybe, Gene, I think, he did a lot of great things on Star Trek. I always give him more credit than people give him, but maybe he was a little bit short-sighted in the sense that he didn't see that developing a technological language with Star Trek had value too. It gave the human condition depth.
Yeah.
Rather than just say, okay, we'll have... Wasn't there a mention of hand lasers too in the cage? I just wanted to throw that out. They had 3-prong hand lasers.
Yeah, there was those old regular gun
right. And then in the Next Generation, Worf's like, they're locking lasers on us. And they're like, oh, lasers, that's great.
Well, that's excusable with another alien race, because their technology.
Right, but they're acting like lasers are so quaint, and then they're like, oh, well, and then, of course, that Jose guy said, well, set up against hand lasers, like the hand lasers weren't that big a deal. Yeah. In an Enterprise, they had phased pistols, not lasers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess, would you assume those casings were just phasers and they were just using a colloquialism, maybe?
Yeah, because you have to assume that, they condensed the phased pistol to phaser, or something, they just condensed the name.
Because, there was a paper printout on the bridge, too, which we've gone into, and what was the other thing? Was the time warp? And... Okay, before we go, I know we've been on a long time, but I wanted to ask you. We talked about it earlier.
Okay.
At lunch. That, we hinted at it here too, that transfer of power to that big rocket on the planet.
Yeah.
Or that big phaser emitter, what was that? That big thing that they fired at the cave?
It looked like a phaser emitter, a giant one that came right off the ship itself.
It was like pulled the phaser off, so.
Yeah.
Okay. So they could channel the energy to this thing somehow.
Yeah. Well, they said they were, because remember, they were in constant communication with the Enterprise. I remember she was telling them, shut it down, or increase the power and stuff like that. Well, it's like, well, wait a minute. I mean, they're saying that it was directly connected. They were feeding it energy from the ship to that phaser gun. How is that possible if there's nothing connected there, or if there's no connection? How you didn't see no beam of light
Maybe they just beam the energy down.
Yeah, I don't
know.
And it just I don't know. Maybe it was just budget things or something like that. But I always wondered how they make that connection there.
Yeah, that seems a little weird because the Enterprise didn't do stuff like that.
They just fired right from orbit. I mean, that's what they did when they encountered Apollo, when they took down his thing. They just fired.
Right, they fired from orbit and same ship, same Connie.
So why couldn't they have tried to do the same thing? On Talos 4, when they took out that bunker there or something.
Right. I mean, it would be weird if they said, Kirk said, Kirk Enterprise, we have this Apollo here, and we have to deal with this energy level. Just bring your giant phaser emitters down here. And
yeah, I mean, it wasn't like these things weren't modular. We could just detach them and take them with you or something. I mean, these were attached to the ship. It's like
they just fired on it like a normal thing. And Next Generation basically did that. They didn't say, because we got to take this phaser emitter down and put it down on the planet. And
yeah. I mean,
did they beam that down in there? Or did they send it by shuttle or what in the cage? I don't know how they did it.
Well, I guess we have to assume they probably beamed it because they showed us a transporter earlier in that episode, so I guess they figure, well, everything that comes down here is done by transporter because they didn't have a shuttlecraft.
And the cage also had some weird, like they were in backpacks. If I remember, these big backpacks they wore.
Yeah.
I don't know what was in those. I mean, maybe the tricorders. I always thought maybe the tricorders were like that metaphoric mobile emitter the Doctor had.
Yeah.
Remember when he had that backpack mobile emitter in that novel?
In that case, they were probably just bringing down supplies because they were going to be down there for a while to try to take parts out of that factory station, whatever it is, to bring up to the ship so they could fix the Enterprise, So,
you mean in the cage?
Yeah, in the cage. No, not the cage. Was where No Man Has Gone Before. Remember when the Enterprise, they went to that planet and they was taking parts.
Oh, yeah, well, the backpacks may have made sense in that one, but in the cage, they really had no need for them.
No, they really didn't. No, but they just had like I said in the other episode,
You justify it in that one, because they were bringing down Delta Vega was the planet.
Yeah, Delta Vega, yeah.
The one you can medically see from Vulcan now.
Yeah.
Well, you can see Vulcan from it, I guess, is what it is. So I guess Delta Vega is in another part of the galaxy now. So
yeah.
I don't know. I think I don't know how they were arranging the stars in these movies, but yeah. So I guess when you bring up circuits, you just again bring up short circuits that seem to happen all throughout Star Trek that take this wonderful universe and remind you that it's written by humans who sometimes don't communicate.
Yeah.
Maybe
it's not perfect. It's not perfect. And
maybe the writers of Star Trek now ought to come together to be a United Writers Federation of Peoples, and just start talking to each other and communicating rather than okay, I'm doing this, and what are you going to do? Whatever, so we won't have messed up things again. Yeah. But nowadays, if you go on Discovery, I'm sure there's a fan BBS where people are like, no, that's not right. You got to do this. So there's probably more communication these days. Not that anybody cares these days, but I don't know if the crew would have cared years ago if Gene Roddenberry in the 60s had said, for those of you who love Star Trek, write into this thing and make notes or note if you notice things. Yeah. Did the Next Generation have anything like that? I don't remember, like a write-in.
I don't think so. I mean, they had just their writing, the people they picked to write.
Well, a fan connection is what I'm saying, like a write-in thing.
Back in those days, I think it was only like Starlog magazine or anything like that where fans would actually talk about things.
Like opinions, yeah. Now, see, it's interesting. If I recall, back in the 80s especially, Doctor Who had an actual fan line open.
Yeah.
There was a guy who was running the show at the time who's controversial, named John Nathan Turner. He's dead now. But he opened it up to the fans. Now, with Doctor Who, it's believed that fan participation screwed the show up because they just started putting in just random things that fans thought were cool. But I don't know. Maybe Doctor Who fans are more into spectacle and stuff, and Star Trek fans are more into accuracy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I've watched Doctor Who, but I don't know how the fandom works. But with Star Trek, I know the Star Trek fans love things to make sense and to have some, because they feel like it's their future, like we were talking about. Like it feels like Star Trek is our future. And our future presented in a raggedy bad way.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at what's happening with Trump now. Do we make Star Trek so it's the United Space Force?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much sloppiness now. I mean, you really need some continuity with Star Trek to give us some grounding. I mean, if things are going wacky in the world, things are going bad, a good continuous Star Trek universe makes life a little more sensible.
Yeah.
Where you're using sensors and not detector circuits.
Yeah.
Where things kind of come together. So I think the idea, the stability of a good stream of technology and development makes sense.
Yeah.
Where we have either impulse or space normal speed. Or impulse, or not, or rockets, whatever. You either one or the other.
Yeah.
Rather than interchange whatever.
Yeah.
Or have wires or have isolinear things. Whatever. You just pick one and get rid of the rocks. That might help.
Yeah, the coal.
There's a product on Amazon that made me laugh. It made me feel weird too. I don't know if you've heard of it. The USB pet rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned that because that reminded me of those rocks coming down. Maybe they're USB pet rocks, sort of wired pet rock. I don't know. Maybe the rocks keep the gravity network. Have we ever seen an actual gravity net on Star Trek? Anybody repairing gravity nets?
Not that I know of. No, I don't.
Maybe they're held down by rocks. Anyway, like I said, I think it just frustrates people when they don't see the universe coming together. It's and in the end, the circuits symbolize that. Like, wait a minute, we're using circuits. We don't use things they use in Roman times. Why are they using circuits then?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. It just gets into that area where something that should make sense to people stops making sense.
Yeah.
So I guess that's any more conclusion you have on the circuit? We've explored way past that. So.
Yeah.
We got anything else to add?
I think we covered that and then some.
All right. Now, this is tentative. I'm just saying this, and I kind of wanted to announce it here. I don't know if I've told you yet. I was talking to Captain Foley from Trek Yards over there, Stuart Foley, and he said to me, I said to him that when we do our next subject, I thought about us all discussing, we discussed a little bit of it today, the relation of technobabble to Star Trek. Why it's important, why it's good. And I thought that would be a good three-way topic because I think, Captain Foley would be really good.
Yeah.
Because he's into the Starship end of it. And I thought he could really add to why technobabble should happen. Because, I mean, you imagine if you have these starships and, somebody, said, just install the paper plate on the saucer, some random weird word,
Yeah.
That sounded almost aphasia. They have to have some sensibility to it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that should be our next subject. It may be prone to change. I'm not against being a little Cartesian now and then, but I'm hoping we'll be able to do that. So, we'll see you next time on Trek Prime. Well, because it'll be your subject next time, maybe it won't be that. But the next time I'm doing a subject, it'll probably be the technobabble thing with Captain Foley. But next week you get to pick the subject, and I think we've explored the circuit thing. We'll probably keep the running gag. I don't see why not. We've actually touched on the subject.
Yeah, that's true.
But like I said, we'll remember this when we do it next time. So live long and prosper, and peace.